Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
In some ways, things are kind of the same.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
the screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is. And
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Welcome everyone. I am so excited you are here with me for the go-to-market process you need from 20 million ARR to 250 million in ARR. I'm Jeffrey Vosell, Director of Product Marketing here at Iterable. You can reach me on Twitter at the little little Twitter handle. I think we're all on Slack nowadays, based off most of us, I assume, working from home and different locations. So, but you can reach me on Twitter. That is at that handle you see just above my name there. As I mentioned here, I'm Director of Product Marketing at Iterable. I've been at Iterable now for a little over 6 months. Prior to that, I led and grew the product marketing team for just about 6 years at HubSpot, from pre-IPO until essentially where they are today, and been in product marketing overall for just about 10 or a little over 10 years now. So I've seen a lot of high growth companies, experienced really product marketing growing quite a bit, and seen different go-to-market plans succeed and frankly, some not go so well as well. So excited to talk through how you can really get your go-to-market process started in a smaller company that's right around the 20 million ARR range, and then as you start to scale, how your go-to-market process can evolve with that as well. So our agenda for today. As I mentioned, I'm going to first go through the foundations of your go-to-market strategy. I'll go through the 5 initial steps for your first go-to-market strategy, and even some of you who may be experienced product marketers listening to this talk will hopefully find value in those steps. I think even for myself, been in product marketing for a while, some of these fundamentals are critically important. And then I'll go through some of the foundational plans at 20 million ARR, and finally wrap it up with the go-to-market process that you need as you scale to and beyond 250 million ARR. The one thing I'll say right now is at HubSpot, I developed very specific go-to-market process and plans for the team as they scaled, and that process, of course, changed as the company grew. And after deciding to leave HubSpot and take the position at Iterable, I decided to implement some of the same processes at Iterable. Now, of course, they are very different. HubSpot is a public company that's very large at this point, and Iterable is rapidly starting to scale and grow. So there are some similarities in the processes, but there's a lot of differences as well. So it really was an overhaul of the processes as I came to Iterable. And I would say that if any of you are interested in what those processes look like today, don't hesitate to reach out to me on Slack or via email. My email address is at the tail end of this presentation because I want to help as many product marketers get this right as possible. All right, so before we begin, let's all get on the same page. Gartner defines a go-to-market strategy as a plan that details how an organization can engage with customers. It includes tactics related to pricing, sales, channels, the buying journey, and new product or service launches as well. I think this is a pretty good definition that holistically includes every aspect of a lot of what product marketers do on a day in and day out basis. Maybe one day you're working on a really big product launch. Another day you are shifting focus to work on some enablement aspect of possibly a launch or possibly some other project. Another day, possibly you're doing some buyer persona research or some broader market analysis or even some broader competitor analysis. Point being, go-to-market activities are very varied in size and scope and what they include. And so as you think about your company scaling, as you think about the number of people that you have on your team at 20 million ARR versus 250 million in ARR or even beyond that, your go-to-market plans are going to have to look pretty different. Some of the key factors in that strategy have to, in my opinion at least, start with the market definition of your target company and buyer. That might be a fancy way of essentially saying you need target ideal customer profiles, ICPs, and you need buyer personas as well. If you're selling B2B, or even if you're serving a B2B to C audience, these buyer personas can be incredibly helpful. And if you've developed buyer personas more than a year ago, or rolled them out more than a year ago, it's probably time to revisit them. With the pandemic, everyone has been forced into working in different ways than they are likely used to. Especially in the technology industries and SaaS, a lot of us are now working from home, a lot of us are fully remote, and that fundamentally changes your persona. I was listening to a product marketing webinar with the CMO from Gong, and he mentioned that they sell into sales and sales operations. And those folks have fundamentally had to go remote because of the pandemic and the broader world environment right now. And he mentioned that heading into 2021, they are working to redevelop personas. So just because you have personas today doesn't mean that they are exactly right. You should really rethink what those personas may look like heading into this new year. Of course, the second aspect of your go-to-market strategy has to be a strategy. It has to include details on pricing, distribution, and positioning, along with a compelling narrative. I think a lot of product marketers love telling great stories, but it needs to include these broader elements that are strategic to your business and set you apart from the market. And while this next point seems obvious in many respects, I find that a lot of organizations, a lot of product marketing teams, a lot of product marketers miss it, which is building alignment as you scale through your go-to-market process. I'll talk about that throughout the next slides. And fundamentally, I think this boils down to a number of key questions. Who is your target customer? Which segment of the market are you targeting? And if you're serving multiple segments of your market, that's okay. But which are the primary, which are maybe some of the secondary, and what are the personas within those segments? Because they may differ. Who are the buyers within those segments? If you're serving an SMB, maybe there's one core buyer that you can serve. Versus if you are selling into the enterprise, it may be a whole team of buyers or buyers across different departments that you suddenly need to appeal to and message to. And that changes fundamentally your go-to-market motions. What makes your product unique in the market? So not just what are the individual feature differences, but truly what sets your product apart from some of the competition out there. What's your positioning to connect with target buyers? It's more important than ever to engage with your buyers at their level to truly offer them a great experience? And finally, how are you strategically pricing and launching your products to serve your audience? So let's dive into some of these things. Robert Burns, in his book Of Mice and Men, said, "The best laid plans often go awry." And for those of you who are product marketers listening to this call, you've probably likely experienced at some point during a launch or a project that something changes. I know I've experienced a ton of these in my career in product marketing, where maybe competition makes a move slightly before you did, or maybe something internal within the company slightly changes, and it really has a drastic effect on possibly your launch plans, your positioning, something to do with a core project that you're working on, and it really requires being adaptable. In fact, if I had to pick one thing that product marketers are really good at, it's being adaptable. It's a skill set that really defines us in many ways as product marketers and needs to get built throughout our go-to-market launch plans. So let's talk about the 5 steps for your first go-to-market strategy. Number 1, understand your customers. I can't emphasize this enough that if you don't do this well and don't do it right, that the rest of this presentation, the rest of what I'm about to talk about, will hardly matter at all. Frankly, if you don't understand your customers, if you don't understand what their true pain points are, or what moves the needle for them, or how they're measured, or what pain they're experiencing, then you won't be able to tie your messaging, your positioning, your pricing, your distribution model into those things that will truly make your business successful. And that's why it matters so much. I know some of you may be listening to this or watching this and roll your eyes when you hear understand your customers. Maybe you've heard that a ton of times before. But truly, it can't be said enough. I spend a fair amount of my time every single week listening to gong calls, reading analyst reports, talking with existing customers, talking with prospective customers. Needless to say, I spend a fair amount of my time, quote unquote, in the market, ensuring that I don't sit in a place where I maybe form perceived notions on what marketers or what our audience here at Iterable may want. I want to always validate those things. I want my team to do the same thing here at Iterable. And because Product Marketing Alliance did a fantastic job with this event and branding it as a ski event, I labeled these deliverables as ski instruction. So think of your deliverables here essentially as ideal customer profiles. And if your business serves multiple segments of a market, multiple audiences, you can have different ideal customer profiles for those different segments. For example, if you sell into, let's say, the Fortune 500 and SMBs as well, you could have 2 different ICPs, one for each of those segments that I just mentioned. You next need buyer personas. If the ICP is your treasure map, so to speak, to the actual organization that you're selling to, then your buyer persona is the map to the individual within that organization. How do you talk to that individual? What questions do you ask that individual? And what are some attributes about that individual that you should make sure to bring up on the call? A lot of people talk about buyer personas as this like really fictional representation of a person. And to some extent it has to be, right? You can't talk about one specific customer or one specific prospect in the market and expect that whatever anecdote that they provide to you applies to every single customer out in the broader market. But you can find and provide broad trends and analysis that live within your buyer personas and are useful across your entire marketing team, your entire sales team, your entire CS team, and the broader organization. Next, for step 2, positioning and messaging. If you're a smaller company that's around 20 million ARR or even less than that, then hopefully you have positioning and messaging for maybe your core product line, or if you have multiple product lines for each one of them. But to effectively bring a product to market, you need to enable the company with how to talk about your product. This means that you need to develop that positioning and that messaging in a way where it lives centrally to your company, and your company understands why you made the decisions to talk about your product in the way that you are. So the two documents that we as product marketers live and breathe virtually every single day are positioning and messaging. They're crucial to our success as PMMs. They are skill sets that we hone and refine. We take classes, we watch talks, we learn from others, we evaluate competitors, how they're doing it. We look at the market and try to figure out how we're unique. And it's a worthwhile endeavor. But ensure that you're not forgetting about the step of enabling your internal team on how to talk about that product, on how to talk about your solution. Because without that step, you're just one single voice shouting out to the marketplace, hoping that this broad sea will listen. Instead, if your company is 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 or 300 or 500, if you can get all of those people shouting that same exact message, that has an amplifying effect. One of the things that I really liked during my tenure at HubSpot, Dharmesh Shah, one of HubSpot's co-founders, attended an event from Sequoia Capital, where Elon Musk was there as well, and they were all glamping, I guess, so to speak, in these tents or these huts. And from Dharmesh's kind of takeaways from the event, he said that Elon said, every person within your company is a vector. And the direction that they're heading in is like that line, so to speak, of that vector. Here in product marketing, it's partially our role. In fact, it's a large part of our role to ensure that every vector throughout the company is aligned based off the positioning and the messaging that we create. When all of those vectors are aligned, when everyone is rowing in the same direction, it's incredibly powerful, and it provides momentum that you can't get when everybody is going in various different directions or different ways. This is the template that we use here at Iterable. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in this session, happy to provide this out to everyone. But we try to connect everything back down to the broader market at the start of this template, and then ultimately lay out the positioning and the messaging in a unique way so that we're enabling the different stakeholders essentially throughout the marketing team and throughout other teams to use this information in the best way possible so that those vectors that I just talked about are truly aligned. All right, number 3, define the customer journey and the path to purchase. Now, to be clear, you don't have to go on a 6 or 8 month or entire year expedition to figure every step that a customer takes and dive deep into every single iota of data that you have. But you do need to broadly understand what the customer's journey is and how they become customers of your product or your solution. Because this allows you as a product marketer to align with your content team, with your sales team, if you have an enablement team, then with your enablement team, and so many others. Product marketers, we sit in a really interesting spot within the organization where we can actually look at the broader set of content, the broader set of marketing that's being put out, and we can see gaps in that. And we can help fill that piece. Product marketers are somewhat T-shaped marketers in the sense where we can see the broad landscape of what's happening, and we can go deep in very functional areas, whether that's writing content in the middle of the funnel that we're missing or possibly bottom of the funnel. But looking across that and defining the customer journey is critical. And the last step here is step 4, internal training and enablement. I talked about vector alignment, and this is where the rubber truly meets the road. If you've seen the movie, and this is where I'm maybe showing my age a little bit, but if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams, then you have likely heard the phrase, if you build it, they will come. Well, For any of you tenured product marketers out there listening to this, you know that that's not really true when it comes to product marketing. If you build internal training, if you build positioning, they won't necessarily automatically come. You need a plan behind this. You need to make it fun, ideally, if possible. And so your ski instruction here or your deliverables are really training courses and maybe some events around it. One of the things I worked on recently at Iterable was a broader new narrative. And we made it fun for the sales team. We started this pitch Olympics. And the sales team had their own different names. They named their teams different things, and they made it fun for each other, where within that direct team, they recorded their own pitches and then voted on who was the best. And that person who did the best made it up to the next round. Things like that make it fun for not only your sales team, but can make it fun for other teams as well, and truly get everyone bought into this content that you're rolling out as well. Beyond just narratives and positioning and messaging, though, you need internal resources like the competitive landscape and how we compare to competitors. You need possibly some one-pagers. You need video assets. You need all of these different assets to enable your broader team in the ways that they can best do their job. In many ways, product marketing, is an acceleration function to help those broader functions like sales speed up in many ways and accelerate revenue. And so if you think about it that way, what resources can you roll out this quarter or next quarter or whatever the time frame may be for you to help your team, your sales team maybe, close more deals? All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about go-to-market plans at 20 million in ARR. In my experience at smaller startups, before HubSpot even, the team size is really small. In fact, at 20 million ARR, a company may not even have a dedicated product marketer. In fact, it's very likely that they don't have a dedicated product marketer. And so while some people think that go-to-market looks like the left-hand side of this slide, what it really looks like is probably the right-hand side of this slide. It's messy. We all know that. As product marketers, we live and breathe and experience that day in and day out. And quite frankly, I don't think we'd have it any other way. It's fun. That's why we're brought in. We organize this chaos, and we try to turn it as much into the left-hand representation of this slide as possible. Now, granted, it's never quite a perfectly straight line as this kind of represents, but it's a lot better than the right-hand side of it. And so at 20 million in ARR, most overall marketing teams are somewhere between 3 and 5 people. I've been a part of the size marketing team, and it's fun. You move fast. You try new things, you experiment, you iterate. But it's very likely that you may not have a totally solidified launch process or a totally solidified go-to-market process. And so as a result, I'd focus on 4 key areas: alignment, story, pricing, and enablement. For alignment, this really means that whether you are a VP of marketing, whether you are maybe a marketing manager at this size company, how can you create resources that everyone across the company will use? It's likely that you won't have the time to fully do everything that a product marketer does. So how can you really get everyone across the company bought in? How can you develop a unique story that applies to the broader market? And how can you consider pricing a unique differentiator potentially to the market? And then enablement, finally, which we've talked about a fair amount so far, is how can you ensure that the broader team is telling and talking about the same story? So the 4 key pillars of go-to-market at 20 million ARR: alignment. So you need to ensure that marketing, sales, product, and executives are aligned here. Now, again, at 20 million ARR, you're moving really, really fast. This means that you can't slow down and spend a ton of time in training and quizzing people, ensuring they maybe understand every single element. It means that you need to roll this out quickly and move on to the next thing. In that light, think about some low friction or low overhead type resources. So I just put one idea here. I'm sure in your mind, maybe you're starting to think of some others, but start a unified launch channel, such as hashtag product name dash launch, or even the date. Or maybe your organization likes to use something like Tiger Teams or some different name for cross-functional teams. Start thinking about how you can unify those teams as a way to align not only executives, but the broader company up and down the spectrum of seniority. On the story, again, because at this size company, you won't likely have a product marketer, one person from marketing should take the lead on the story. Story development and narrative development, narrative design is a incredibly fun activity. I personally, it's one of my favorite aspects of product marketing, actually. But in reality, it's hard to do by committee. It's really hard to do by committee. So pick one person from marketing. So if you're a VP of marketing listening to this, if you are a director of marketing listening to this, pick one person, or maybe do it yourself, and of course, share it with your team and get feedback. But whomever that individual is that's leading this needs to drive that story forward. And ideally, this story needs to be at the intersection of your product differentiation, the market, and also the pain and the shift that's happening in the broader world. And on that last point, I want to talk about that for just a second. For anyone familiar with narrative design, then you're likely familiar with talking quite heavily about the shift that's happening in the broader world. The traditional framework for positioning identifies a pain point that our prospects or our customers are experiencing. We've all heard that before. It's the standard positioning framework that we've all run through. The challenge with that these days is that you might place a customer or a prospect back on their heels a little bit. You may make them slightly defensive by telling them that they have some sort of problem. What if you missed the mark a little bit? What if you didn't exactly nail the pain point that they have? Instead, if you define the shift that's happening in the broader world, then you can avoid that, and you can show who the winners of that shift are versus who maybe failed to make that shift in the market. Any really forward-looking company will want to take that leap and will hopefully want to use your product to enable them to do so. Next is pricing. I think as you are at a small scale of maybe 20 million ARR or so, pricing is incredibly important. In fact, pricing is one of those things that if you were asking me what's one thing product marketers will get involved in and not necessarily start to own, but start to have an influence over in 2021, I would say pricing is pretty close to the top of that list. It's not to say we'll become financial modelers, but we will look at broader pricing analysis and we'll work with others throughout the organization to define what pricing should be or define what pricing should at least look like. So think about how you can look at the differentiation, look at your competitors, and don't blindly follow your competitors here. I can't overstate that enough. I think a lot of companies see that their competitors are charging for some sort of add-on or charging for a product in some way, and naturally just go that same direction that their competitors are. Instead, think about how you can use different pricing models, think about how you can use free trials, think about how you can use free software overall. At HubSpot, I was a part of a lot of the conversations on the free CRM, and we thought heavily about the CRM market before ultimately deciding to roll out a free CRM in a market that was crowded with paid solutions. So think about how you can do something like that and really drive a ton of adoption with your solution as a way to uniquely differentiate your product as well as your company. And lastly, enablement. Again, because you're moving so fast at this size and stage, you don't have the time to fully build out a really deep enablement plan. So what I'd recommend is the assets that you are creating, post them in centralized places. Let your team consume them. Let your broader team, that is, let the entire company consume them in ways that they prefer to. So if you use Google Docs or if you use some wiki like maybe Jira or something else, then post it to those places And of course, on launch day, email around your broader team and make sure you point to some of those resources so that everyone can consume them. All right, let's talk about the go-to-market process as you start to scale. 20 million ARR is certainly an exciting point. A lot of companies start to hit an inflection point at that time where they start to grow, potentially stall depending on what their NPS is. And at 250 million ARR, you're beginning to really have an established product marketing team. You likely have a dedicated, not only product marketer, but a dedicated team overall. Now that team probably isn't huge necessarily at this point, but you have maybe 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 product marketers at this stage. And so the 4 functional areas that I suggest that you focus on here are similar to what we saw at 20 million ARR with one key difference. Impact is the one that I'm differentiating here instead of pricing, but alignment, story, and enablement are all the same. There are some different attributes about each of these that I'll go into though. So step 1, alignment. And this is really not just alignment, but it's alignment at scale. If my team were on this call or co-presenting with me, they'd probably roll their eyes at this exact moment where I've said dozens, possibly hundreds of times that over-communicating in a clear way and consistently is the best antidote for a launch gone awry. And it's true. The more you communicate, the more you provide clarity out to your broader go-to-market team, the better off your launch will function. The more it will look like that straight line, so to speak, towards success. So as far as deliverables or ski instruction here, establish a cross-functional go-to-market team. That team should be representative of your different aspects within marketing, demand gen, customer marketing, obviously product marketing. Product marketing should lead it, in fact. There should be a product team member on there, such as the PM who is ultimately leading this launch from their perspective. There should be likely somebody from your sales team or sales enablement if that function exists at your company, and likely a whole bunch of others as well. Regularly check in with management and stakeholders. My advice here is, depending on when you find out about a launch, and to be clear, at this scale of company, you need launch tiering. Not every launch needs to have 100 hours of your time and effort as a PMM dedicated to it. If it won't move the needle for your prospects or your customers, if it won't make them possibly choose your solution versus a competitor, then it's not to say don't dedicate time to it, but don't dedicate a ton of time to it at the same time. So you need launch tiering. For a large scale launch, something that is important, something that does truly move the needle. My suggestion, based off the time that you find out about that launch, then start meetings roughly then. And as you get closer to launch, start to increase the frequency at which you meet. So the advice I typically give to my team is that about 5 months or 6 months before we find out about a large size launch, then start to meet biweekly. So twice a month, the go-to-market team will come together. And at that point, customer marketing, demand gen marketing, some of these other functions aren't necessarily involved quite yet. It's really the product team, it's the PMM, and it's some other key members, possibly some UX folks, things like that are involved in this go-to-market discussion that are really talking about some of the fundamentals, some of the foundations of that product launch. As that time starts to go on, maybe when you get to month 4 or so away from launch, that's when you start to pull in some of these other folks. Content development will take a fair amount of time. Are you doing a video? Are you doing a podcast? What different aspects, what different content are you building into this launch? And consider the lead times on that. If you're doing a large scale series, then actually you want to back out this time frame that I'm giving you right now and maybe make it more like 9 months or a year or even more than that. My point being, consider what the foundational go-to-market strategy that you're going to want to roll out is. Make sure you have alignment and pull in the right people at the right times. And finally, I can't emphasize this enough, establish a unified plan that is available to everyone. So I have a Google spreadsheet that is this one that you see here as an example. And this is really the same spreadsheet that the product marketing team at HubSpot uses to launch. As you can see, based off the kind of gray areas, there are different departments listed there or different kind of functions listed there. And this spreadsheet scrolls down and there's a lot more information on it. I'm happy to share this with anyone curious as well. And it has formulas set up so that as you begin to check off assets, the kind of stoplight chart up at the top where it says complete, potential delays, and off track / blocked automatically updates. That gives somebody like myself or even my team above me, that gives us a really clear indication on the days and weeks and potentially months leading up to the launch, whether this launch is actually on track. So it's incredibly important to keep an eye on that, as well as key assets that are progressing towards the launch. Second is storytelling. Storytelling is literally your best way to break through the noise in the market. If you haven't read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, I would stop listening to this and go read it. But in all seriousness, I would highly recommend reading it. It's a really compelling book in many respects. There's a lot of blog posts, a lot of content out there on the broader web about that book as well that you can certainly read too. But it's this concept of you want to kind of play in an ocean that's open and free versus a red ocean that is crowded with competitors. Naturally, you'll be able to capture more of the market when it's open and free versus when you're kind of fighting for every inch or every mile because there's a lot of competition or there's just a lot of difficulty breaking in. And the story is really the best way to do that. How you're positioning yourself is the best way to do that. The story needs to reflect your unique differentiation and social proof. It goes without saying, or at least I think it does, that especially in 2020, as we head into 2021, that customers often won't, frankly, fully believe your story if we're being real with each other here. You need your customers to speak up for you, whether that's on review sites or whether that's building them into your story. You need to have them speak up for you and on your behalf. So as product marketing, as a product marketer, it's never been more important to ensure that you are working directly with customers on this, or possibly if you're a larger size company, that you're working with maybe your customer marketing function to do this as well. We recently did this at Iterable. In fact, just today, as I'm talking about this, we launched an all-new product called Brand Affinity. The story that we wrote in that positioning and messaging template that I showed you a number of slides ago, really it filters through every aspect of the campaign, through social, through this feature page that you see here, through the video that's embedded on this feature page, and through all of the emails that are being sent out. Through every aspect of the campaign, this story and this narrative exists in a unified way. And it's important because, again, it goes back to that vector alignment. Every sales rep who's talking to somebody about this product launch or about this product now is enabled in the best way to talk about it, with customer references, with content that they need. And as a result, that increases velocity and momentum. Step 3 is impact. So as you scale, as you begin to have dedicated product marketers, as your company is doing more, maybe marketing over different channels, more channels, there will be a tendency to want to try to just do more. That launch spreadsheet that I just showed a few slides ago can naturally grow exponentially long. It can get to hundreds of rows potentially. I would urge you to fight that tendency to some extent. To some extent, less is more here, where it's not to say only do one thing or only do two things, but really ensure that you're nailing the execution on the things that you are doing and ensure that they're high impact. If you have data on past launches. And in fact, if you don't have data on past launches, that's a concern here as well. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But if you have data on past launches, go back to some of that data. Did some of the webinars that you ran truly drive people through your funnel and into closed won business? How about the emails that you sent? What about the social campaign? It's not to say don't do any of those things. A lot of those things are very valuable in their own rights. But consider how you might change some of those things this time around if maybe one of those asset types or content types wasn't as successful as you thought it might be. At HubSpot, and I carry this into Iterable as well, we use this framework where there's really one kind of primary goal for a given launch. In this particular case, for this launch, it was driving revenue, and there's a number of secondary goals for a launch, up to 3. And those secondary goals can extend out to 90 days beyond the launch. In fact, they should, because product marketer's role doesn't stop on launch day. In fact, it continues through 90 days after the launch so that you can drive awareness, drive alignment, and continue ensuring that the broader company is set up for success. I apologize that a lot of this is blurred. I wish I could share a lot of it with you, but I think the high level category, so to speak, is still helpful here. Whether it's driving revenue will drive success for your business and your product line, whether it's driving awareness, whether it's driving whatever it might be for your business, ensure that you're defining this and you're getting buy-in across a team. That will naturally help provide alignment through your go-to-market team, and it will naturally ensure that your go-to-market process is streamlined. And lastly, enablement. Ensure everyone within your company to share the launch. At HubSpot, we ran internal contests where folks could win a trip or a vacation. Folks could win gift cards, and we made it fun. We brought in cupcakes, we cooked for people, we did all of these interesting things so that pictures started showing up on Instagram, self-recorded videos showed up on LinkedIn, all of this content showed up on all of these broader networks. And suddenly, folks who may not have heard about a product launch, suddenly we're hearing about it, and we broke out of that kind of initial bubble, so to speak, that maybe the company has or just the database has. And it really helped extend the launch out to the broader world. So as you think about enabling everyone within your company, think about not only how you train people, but think about how they can share the word as well. At this size and scale, you do have a dedicated PMM team, so you really should be providing centralized templates and training. You should make it engaging for your team and get them to buy in so you naturally have more success. I mentioned the pitch off thing just a little bit ago, and that's an example of how you can make it fun. To be clear, you need sales to be bought into something like that. If product marketing is solely driving something like that, it can be forced and it can feel forced to maybe the sales team or another team. So you really need to get these other teams bought in to truly make it work well. This is an example. So here at Iterable, we use training software that we call WorkRamp, and it includes all the information that you may want to know about a particular feature or a particular launch. So one aspect of this WorkRamp training, I mentioned the brand affinity launch, is a sample pitch. This is where we as a PMM team will record ourselves pitching this solution or this product. They'll hear how kind of an idealized pitch, a high-level pitch will go of this product. And it's used as essentially the kind of gold standard, so to speak, of that product launch. You can't just hand over a bunch of words to maybe a sales rep or a CSM and expect them to nail the story, or even possibly just a slide deck. This resource on helping people nail that pitch is incredibly helpful. And so the 4 key pillars of go-to-market at 250 million in ARR are very similar to what we just talked about. I'm not going to cover every single one of these bullets because a lot of them are very similar to what you just heard, but the important points are driving alignment, ensuring you have a unique story, ensuring that the activities you're doing are high impact, and ensuring that you are enabling your team to be successful. So thank you very much. I appreciate you attending this session. I hope it was helpful. If you do have questions, I am around to help answer them. You can always email me, as you see my email address on this slide here, or you can reach out to me on Twitter. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of this Product Marketing Alliance event.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate. But for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways,
flow charts, and
things are kind of the same.
as fast as we can. People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously?
We still got a couple things just to polish this up again.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is. And that
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Hi, everyone. My name is April Rasa. I head up product marketing, communications, and content here at HackerOne. I'm super excited to be here with you today. So the talk today is really about how product marketing can help influence the product roadmap. And just to level set, a product roadmap is a visualization of the life of your product. It's really the essential strategy document for your product as it lays out its vision and the stages between where you are now and the realization of that vision. So let's cover the agenda. I'm going to cover what makes a great product. So we'll talk through some product principles. We'll talk about how to think about your customers versus your non-users and where the growth may come from. How to work effectively with your product counterparts, knowing your superpower, and some final words. So product principles are really the core DNA of your product. They're the fundamental values that underlie every action, decision, or move the product team makes. The way to make your product stick is to focus on your customers and your non-users or potential buyers. So the way I think about product principles, I think of them in 4 distinct areas. One is start with real user pain, provide value immediately. As you start to think about adding more features and functionality into your product, you're going to make it heavier. So you need to reconcile between simplicity and complexity. And then the last is making your product stick and making it as a must-have within the organization so your users can't live without it. But when we think about our users, there's a lot of ways that we can think about them. Teams typically focus relentlessly on their core users. There's little time spent on people who don't actually use their products. And that makes sense initially, right? When you're a startup and you're launching a new product, it's natural to obsess with every user it touches. Every click, every tap, every piece of data is precious feedback about your features. Whether you're a startup looking to get to that product market fit or a later stage organization looking to hit greater velocity, more and more of your engineers, your designers are going to be spending a disproportionate amount of time on the core users. The people who work on growth and marketing will still often continue to look at the data on leads, and they're trying to find new ways of converting those non-users to users. However, as a percentage of the company, fewer and fewer of your engineering resources are really going to be focused on your non-users. And I think that's a huge opportunity for product marketing to lean in. Growth comes from your non-users. You have more of those than you have actual users. So your brand is often determined by the way your product touches those non-users. Now, for marketers in the room, this has been known for decades, and it's a brand marketing staple that takes at least 3 touches of a brand before it'll stick with a potential customer. It's not new for us. But somewhere along the way, I think software companies have really lost touch with the basic idea that every piece of content that contains their brand is a potential touch. It's not just the users of the core product that matter for a long-term growth. I mean, think about it. Tesla spends time thinking both about the feeling a driver has in the car, as well as the experience of a non-Tesla owner who's watching that car go by, right? That's the same experience that you want to be thinking about as a product marketing. How do I reconcile between my non-users and my users? Where do I see the product anchoring and going towards? And how do I start to understand those core requirements? When you think about that, every function within the organization has a role to be able to influence that product roadmap. Software is a team sport. Each function brings something critical to that process. Every function has a superpower. If you think about it, product has the power to frame the discussion with strategy and metrics. Design, they have the power to visualize those possible choices. Engineering, the power to show what is possible. And sales, the power to show that impact directly on revenue and adjacent markets. Customer success, the power to cement those customer experiences. Product marketing, the power to bring the voice of the customer and the voice of the non-users and drive the go-to-market. And if we think about that, product marketing really has a unique foothold within an organization. We provide the glue you need to connect inbound and outbound activities cross-functionally. So while each team may have a point of view on the inputs for the product roadmap, because we sit at the nexus of these teams, we can bring a holistic approach to the table. We can provide unique insights about a customer, a buyer, their perceptions, and what is unique to the product and how it can help influence the roadmap. If done right, you can couple the data, the market, and the customer insights in the intake process. And that is really key. And I think that is an opportunity for product marketing to really invest in your relationship and your partnership with your product folks. The only way to make collaboration sustainable is to build a foundation of trust, no matter how bought in leadership is. Product marketing and product management have to invest in each other's mutual success. It is a team sport. You're a team. The only way to perform like a team is to invest in those you're working with and to align on those shared goals. Now, one of the things that I did early on in my career was, I learned pretty early that in the organization that I was at, product marketing wasn't well understood. And there's going to be organizations that you're in where they might be mature and they have a good understanding of how to work with product marketing. But you got to start with a framework. And I use Serious Decisions as a framework, and you can use Pragmatic Institute as a framework. They have some great frameworks. the key is to be involved early in the product development lifecycle to bring that unique perspective. And you start to build a framework on shared responsibilities, core responsibilities that product marketing is on point for, what product is on point for, and get alignment early on with the core leadership team and the product team. And make sure that you guys have a shared understanding of who's on point and who's doing what. Now, the way I think about it, I think these are kind of no-brainers, but we'll go into some detail. There are really three ways that you can actually help influence the product roadmap. And I'm coming at it from a B2B lens, but really it could be applicable across the board. The first is establish trust and credibility. The second is data. You have a unique opportunity to unify customer data, and I'll go into a little bit more specificity around that. And then the third is really around competitive and market impact. So if we think about building trust and credibility, the reality facing many product marketers today, as I mentioned, is that you're probably dealing with not a very good universal understanding of the definition of product marketing among organizations or within organizations. Some organizations define the role purely as post-product development process. We've got the product, it's ready to go, ship it over the wall, product marketing, make things pretty, get the assets out there. Other organizations think of product marketing as purely a demand generation function. But really, at the heart of it, if you think about product marketing, we provide the most value where we develop a process for successfully bringing products to market. And the onus is on us to help educate the market as well as our team members and the company. So before any line of code is written, you need to make sure that you can answer the following questions, right? Define the target audience. What's the problem we're trying to solve in the marketplace? Why is it important? Define, how the solution actually changes the status quo. What are the compelling reasons for a buyer to actually buy the product? Determine how product is actually differentiated from the competition. This is where you can bring a lot of your viewpoints and the market viewpoints into the fray and help product, right? How do you think about our competitive differentiation? We can identify market-driven, requirements around what we're hearing from our non-users as well as from our customers. We can start to map out how we think about the go-to-market motion, right? How do we think about the customer acquisition and the distribution around the product and how it's being built? Is it going to be a freemium? Are we going to do some kind of a free trial? How do we think about that motion? And looking at how to justify the business case through our customer anecdotes, through insights that we get from the analyst community, through market trends, through market data, and being able to bring product through that process and through that journey is really critical. I suggest conducting joint briefings with your product folks and the industry analysts. There's going to be specific viewpoints and business cases that you want to make that it would be great for a third party to justify those same things with the product team. So why not bring them into the fold and bring them into those briefings? Unifying customer data. So there's a lot of ways that product marketing intel comes from, right? It comes from frontline conversations and marketing-driven surveys. Products intel may be from discovery calls. It could be from product-driven surveys. Both teams are looking at valuable data, but neither team may be operating from the same insight. So the onus is on you to unify that and to be able to tell that story in a way that resonates. There's a couple ways that you might be able to do this. For those that haven't set up a CAB, it's a customer advocacy board, you should consider that because you can get direct product feedback through your most valuable customers. You can set up customer focus groups. There are a lot of mechanisms of doing that online today. Establish a process for collecting and analyzing customer feedback in a systematic way that really brings all of those touch points that we talked about into one cohesive framework. It's the only way to really understand holistically what customers need. And if we can more easily understand what customers need, then we can focus more on how to strategically respond to them and how to anchor the roadmap to map to their needs or to map to their future needs. The last piece is really around competitive and market impact. I listed out some questions here that ultimately you want to answer, but really as you think about segmenting feedback to understand how roadmap changes could expand your total addressable market, they can convert existing deals, they can help you retain customers by providing missing value, only by combining impact from insights, product marketers can really move from being purely executional focused in an organization to being strategic influencers and drivers of company growth. Your data is going to be your power. So you want to look at, is there a growing competitive threat that makes delivering on the product enhancement more important? What are those? How many additional customers could be acquired if this particular item on the roadmap were built? Build a business case. How could improvements in my overall product reliability ensure existing customers keep coming back? You want to do those win-loss analysis and drive actionable insights to help drive key areas in your roadmap. And only until you do that, and until you get a product roadmap that is visionary and maps to the key pillars and themes that you want the company has agreed to, can you then take that roadmap and actually build a product marketing roadmap? That's right, a product marketing roadmap. A product marketing roadmap visualizes your corporate vision and really could become the rallying point for all of the employees. It shows them where the company is going, but how they can grow with it. And it really gives executives a ship to captain. And the way you can do that is sort of in a number of different ways. You can build a company architecture which sets the vision for your product and your marketing positioning. You can tell that narrative. It's really important that you articulate, the boxes on the charts into a visual narrative story, right? Establish that company and product narrative, and then start to frame, how are we going to market? How are we packaging this? How are we pricing this? How are we going to drive growth and acceleration and bringing that velocity to the marketplace? So I hope this has been helpful in terms of giving you some ideas as far as how you as a product marketing professional can really impact the product roadmap. I think there's 4 key areas that I wanted to just summarize. Your data and your customer insights are power. Don't lose sight of your non-users, right? You've got your core customers, but you also have those non-users, and don't lose sight of those, because you can bring a lot of insights to the table by understanding where you want the puck to go. Identify the key areas impacting revenue. You want to be able to show where the adjacent markets and where are the markets that you could potentially interrupt based on the competitive and the win-loss analysis that you do, and you can make those competitive insights actionable. And I think only by working cross-functionally can you identify trends that you're seeing across the entire customer experience. Remember, you're at the nexus of the entire corporate function, and you bring a lot of insights and a lot of data points that siloed teams just can't bring to the table. So don't lose sight of that. So again, thank you for having me. It was great to be able to share some of my experience and knowledge to this core team. I'm always available to answer questions. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with fellow product marketing professionals. Thanks again, and I wish you all the best. Take care.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways,
flow charts, and
things are
as
kind of the same.
fast as we can.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is. And that.
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Welcome to this session on Use Case University, Twilio's unique approach to sales enablement and certification. I'm Vanessa Thompson, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Twilio, and I'm responsible for the PMM team that spans Twilio's major product areas: messaging, email, voice, video, SIP trunking, and account security. Now, if you haven't heard about Twilio before, we're a customer engagement platform that lets you build any experience that comes to mind. Our secret sauce is the fact that our products are APIs, which means that all you need to do to build a unique experience is to have an imagination. All right, let's get into it. Now, in keeping with the off-piste or snow theme, I'll be taking you through our Use Case University certification program as if it was a super giant slalom event. Now, this event is also known as the Super G for short. And for those of you that aren't ski buffs, the Super G is the ultimate combination of speed and skill, where a skier has to get down the mountain as fast as possible while making sure that they complete the assigned gates and turns. This felt so similar to what we needed to do for Use Case University that it made a ton of sense using this analogy for this content. So let's get into the material and see how we did it. Now, most of the work in a big event happens before you even get to the start line. So in this session, I'll walk you through the main steps we took to get Use Case University off the ground, as well as the outcomes and learnings that we had from the program. First, we chose a path and made a commitment to change. Then we set out to influence the influencers. We had to roll through the changes and bad weather and the pandemic environment. We kept it simple. We made sure that we chose our line appropriately and well. And finally, we have some great tips on how to say thank you and to provide great swag. Now, just 2 years ago, when I took over my team, the PMMs were focused on optimizing for product level developer signups. At this time, that was the right thing for our business to do, but we were also staring down a confluence of challenges. One of those challenges was that our larger customers wanted to buy a solution to a problem. They didn't want to buy our org chart. As PMMs, we were organized around major product areas, but creating a solution for a customer involved multiple products, and we just weren't set up to deliver that holistically. At the same time, we'd been going through a sales hiring surge, and we had a bunch of new salespeople, many of whom were used to selling solutions rather than APIs. We noticed that many of our new reps weren't yet comfortable translating common customer problems into a consistent story to sell the value of Twilio. Now, as a manager, I was faced with a decision. Do I stick with the status quo or do I make a commitment to change? Now I decided to commit, and like in the Super G, we were ready for the hard work and dedication required to make it all work. At the time, this felt pretty risky because we really didn't know what the outcome would look like, but we just had to do an experiment and give it a go anyway. Now that we'd made a commitment, we were on the mountain. We also needed to find the chairlift, which in our case was figuring out where we should start. We began analyzing all of our customer buying patterns to find the most common use cases or solutions that our customers were assembling with our APIs. And after this analysis, we landed on a set of 9 core use cases that both reinforced our core business and enabled us to reach newer revenue opportunities. Then we set off by getting buy-in. Now, this is a great analogy for getting on the chairlift. You meet all sorts of people at the chairlift, but you also need to wait at the bottom for your party if you want to ride together. So this is what we did. I made sure to check in with my key stakeholders in sales and marketing to make sure that they were all on board with this change in focus. To do that, I used a standard discussion deck that I was able to leave behind with them to make sure that they were all equipped to answer any questions that came up. Now, you also really need a champion if you want to execute on a large scale program, and a C-level champion if you can get one. Now, I got super lucky because our CMO was really bullish on this idea of a certification program, and we'd already started down this use case path. So when I pitched this to her, she came with this really great idea and totally leveled us up by taking what was initially an initial basic monthly training and said, look, we should do this full-blown certification thing. Now, the other thing that I did at this time was I didn't lay out any goals for my program until I'd socialized this overarching idea of use cases and we had found our champion. And what was super important was the fact that our CMO had some really great ideas. It meant that she could be the one that owned the overarching goal for us. Now that was fantastic for me and my team because we were just able to follow along on her influence slipstream and focus on executing the program. I then worked with our partners in sales enablement on a shared goal for Use Case University. It was to provide a certification program where global AEs, sales specialists, and BDRs were comfortable speaking to our 9 use cases, as well as incorporating relevant customer stories into their pitches. Now, in the process, we also wanted to enable our reps to become trusted advisors to our customers and build a solid storytelling habit. I did want to mention here that there is a bit of a different mindset that comes with certification as opposed to just regular sales enablement or training. So we needed to make sure that what we were planning wasn't too overwhelming or stressful for our sellers. But we hit some bad weather. And in your Super G event, if the weather is bad enough on race day, you need to postpone and reset. For us, the bad weather was a global pandemic and we had to reset. We had initially planned a series of in-person events kicking off in March, but we all know what happened. The pandemic hit and our sales leadership team decided to push this out to July so their teams could settle into a new rhythm. But this postponement was actually a blessing in disguise. It meant that the way that we delivered the event needed to change, but we also had an opportunity to rethink the material and make sure that we hit the right balance of information and education. So we were through the bad weather and we made it to the top of the mountain, but before we left the gates, we needed to choose our line. And this is especially important in Super G because it is so fast. And for Use Case University, we aim to keep the content simple and minimize the risk to make sure that we have the capacity to take on any other projects that the pandemic might throw at us. When preparing the pre-work for reps, I assigned a PMM lead for each of the 9 use cases that a PMM was responsible for their bill of materials. They each produced a 1-pager, which was a leave behind for a customer, a set of digital flashcards that covered basics like discovery questions, persona information, some referenceable customer stories, as well as some objection handling. And the most important thing that they did was source a superstar seller or a few superstar sellers that could record a 5-minute pitch on their use case. Now, we gave reps 6 weeks to prepare with all of the material that we'd given them, and then we asked them to sign up for sessions, prepared to make that 5-minute pitch on any of the use cases. Now, unlike Bridget Jones, we had chosen our line before we got to the classroom certification sessions, and we were confident on our ability to execute. For the classroom sessions, we hosted a 90-minute video call with 24 reps and 3 facilitators. At the start of every session, we had a sales leader do a 5-minute pitch to set the tone of the session and inspire the reps. We then broke out into 3 breakout rooms, and it was pretty easy from there. The reps would take their turns doing a 5-minute pitch, and the facilitator would judge if the rep had met our passing criteria. The criteria was also very, very basic and easy to understand. It was 1, how well did they communicate the value prop? 2, did they make their pitch relatable? And 3, did they stay within that 5-minute time frame? It's pretty easy to keep waffling on, so we wanted to make sure that that was part of it as well. To keep it fun and entertaining in the sessions, we had the facilitators use a digital spinner, sort of similar to the Wheel of Fortune. That meant we had a fair way to choose the use case that a rep was going to pitch in a session. Overall, we had a really great time in these sessions, and many of the reps commented during the sessions that they were really happy they'd gone through the process, even though there was a lot of pressure to prepare. Many of them were very nervous beforehand, but they went through it and they felt a sense of relief, but also they were really glad that they had gone through and learned all of the material. After the program was over, we wanted to do something memorable. So the reps, we knew that they had appreciated, we wanted them to know that we appreciated them and all of the effort that they had put in. So we did what good marketers do, and we sent them a swag box. It had a vest as well as some other goodies, including a physical booklet that contained all of those flashcards I mentioned earlier that had all the use cases covered in there. But there was a catch. If you wanted a swag box, you need to fill in our feedback survey. This survey enabled us to get some really great feedback about what worked and what didn't. Through the feedback process, the most important thing we learned that was the reps' level of comfort pitching certain use cases had increased dramatically. But the biggest aha moment for us as part of the feedback was that most reps actually preferred to use the recordings of their peers to educate themselves on the content for the pitch. Every rep has a different style, and we realized that there was a ton of appreciation for this peer learning approach. We also found that our BDR team preferred using the flashcards. Now, when they're on a call with a prospect, they found the discovery questions really, really useful because they were able to flick through to the section that they needed in the book or on the digital flashcards or in the book that they got at the end. And they were able to quickly reference the section that was useful to them. So one of the things that we've already started to do as an outcome of the sessions is to weave in this peer recording approach into more of our sales enablement materials. Every time we produce like something that we want our sales team to pay attention to, we add a short video to make sure reps have an alternative learning source to have written collateral. Now, finally, all in all, our Use Case University certification program was a success, and we're continuing to apply our learnings from the program. So I wanted to just say thank you for taking this journey down the mountain with me, and I'm really looking forward to taking some questions after the event. Thank you very much.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways,
flow charts, and
things are kind of the same.
as fast as we can.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is. And that
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Hi, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Today I'm joined by Scott Shapiro. Scott's the Principal Product Marketer at Qualtrics. Thanks for joining us today, Scott. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah. Hey, Emma, it's great to be with you today and the rest of the audience here at the conference as well. Thank you so much for having me. So a little basic background on me, born and raised in New York. I've been living in Seattle, working professionally for about 8 years now in the product marketing space. I started my career at Microsoft for about 5 years, particularly in Microsoft Office with OneNote, Word, PowerPoint, all those fun things that we're familiar with day to day, of course. And today, like you mentioned, I work at Qualtrics, focused particularly on our customer experience business, really just helping people around the world figure out how to close that gap between sort of what do they expect from a business and reality. Is it above it or below it sometimes? How can we help you get those insights and take action? And today I'm excited to talk with you about kind of all the different ways to hopefully be a successful product marketer and let you in on the secret that there is no one right way. Your strengths are valid and great ones to lean into throughout the process.
Excellent. So today we're discussing playing to your strengths. So I'll kick off with the first question. So just like a product marketer will evolve over time and their offering will change. Do you have any general tips on how a product marketer should market themselves to a new organization, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I think about if you're trying to use this metaphor of product marketers and people we're our own type of product, we're our own brand, right? The same advice you'd probably give yourself about discussing a new product, a new launch. Don't speak in platitudes. Figure out what makes you unique and what is a sentence or a description about yourself that's not really easily replicable by someone else. And I know it's intimidating. It's hard to figure out what are my phrases, what are my concepts. And the nice thing is, you don't have to figure it out alone. Go to people that you trust, your managers, your peers, even sometimes some of the curmudgeons in the office that you're not so sure they like you. Ask them what do they think of you. You probably already have a built-in mechanism for that, and start pulling out the different themes and seeing what matters to you there. You know, I know for me particularly, I was surprised to find out that I actually got positive feedback, and part of my brand was this guy's really good at taking feedback. You know, something you don't normally think about being a part of your brand, and it kind of meant I was flexible. I could play to a lot of different teams. So I learned that as part of my brand, and I offered that to an organization of being able to pivot. And, you know, just like a product, the way that you interact with a team or a new organization, it evolves over time. There's a life cycle to each of these pieces. So, you mentioned, Emma, what about to a new organization? The thing I'd really think about is you got to listen more than you speak right off the bat. You're going to have these instincts. You have these brilliant ideas, and there probably really are good ideas a lot of the time, but you need to ingratiate yourself to the organization and get a feel for why are some choices made the way that they already are. The instinct is going to be to come in and say, I have 10 new ideas right off the bat. And some might be good, some might be ideas they've already thought of and they were the wrong ideas, and some used to be the wrong ideas and now they're the right ones. I'll give you a quick example from my own career that might be relevant for you. When I joined Microsoft, as I mentioned, straight out of undergrad university, I was 22 years old, and we were focusing on launching the Office 365 subscription. And I swear, as my first week on the job, I read through 30 different emails that are sent out. They welcome people to the subscription, things of that nature. And I marched right into my manager's office and said, I have all these ideas, all these mock-ups, all these edits. And you could just see the look on her face with her eyes rolling back in her head of like, this guy thinks we didn't have this. We didn't have these ideas already. And I had to sort of retreat with like a tail between my legs. And that was a disappointing example where I was like, oh, if I just listened, I would see why these are the decisions. But it comes back around. And I actually realized soon afterwards, I started asking these questions of, why does it take us so long to do things? A common refrain that we always feel in the product marketing world is these turnaround times should be shorter, not longer. So I brought up the question, I checked in with my manager, and the reaction was more or less, I don't know, that's just the way things have always been. So in this case, when I realized something was frustrating, or maybe there was an opportunity or a gap, there was value to be added, I asked questions, I reassessed the process, and we ended up actually cutting down to about 50% of the turnaround time to make changes to our outbound marketing email campaign. So I leave this all with you to think about as you join a new organization. You have different assets and different advice to offer at each phase in the journey, but be sure to start with listening, and then you'll know how you can really add value at each point. And you're just demonstrating that you're trying to show, not tell them what your skill sets are. No one's going to believe you if you list off 100 things you can do. Take a chance to actually show them your accomplishments along the way.
Absolutely. So what are the primary responsibilities of a product marketer that, in your opinion, will never change or should never change?
To the basic nature of what we're talking about today, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can be a successful product marketer, of course. As opposed to focusing specifically on skills like be great at messaging, know how to write a tagline, maybe depending on what your organization needs, I would recommend focusing on, what are really themes or mindsets that can help all of us as product marketers, if we want to focus on that today. The first thing I would think a lot about is you've got to live and breathe the customer's experience and the vision. You're really going to be the primary conduit to talking about what does a customer care about? What's happening within the user experience flow? Or if it's an online product, what is the cart abandonment situation like, and the searching for help and customer service on the website? You need to understand day by day, what does a customer care about today? What do you think they'll care about tomorrow? And then how do you speak to them? A lot of what you're doing is listening to that audience and figuring out how to tell them in a compelling way. We can actually offer you what you told us already you wanted. So number one, just know the customer experience confidently and be curious and learning. The second big one is, what are your business goals? As a product marketer, we have this kind of amorphous job. It's different at different companies, different product life cycles, different industries. But if you know what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, you'll have a better sense of, are we performing in the right way? Have I planned my next quarter, my next year to the right outcomes? And you've got to also be aware that if your role happens to be global in nature, the needs of the audience over in Australia might be totally different than the needs of the audience in America. Or your local field marketing team might be at a different cycle in how they like to pick up what you're able to flow to them from corporate and vice versa. So be conscious of that when I say know the business. Next up, I would really focus on the mindset of be a connector and a team player. You'll probably hear this theme consistently from a lot of product marketers. You sit in this go-between role. You're really, if you're simple about how you think about it, there's sort of outbound marketing over here with like your social media, your websites, et cetera. And then over here is like a product management engineering, and you're hanging out in the center. If you're doing your job in a really simplistic way, you're going to just feel like you're taking these notes back and forth from each side and letting them make decisions. The goal isn't to be a messenger. The goal is to figure out, how do I add value? How do I think a little more broadly because I have access to all these different pieces of the puzzle here? And that'll help you to really think about this idea of you're a team player to more than just sort of your manager and his or her direct reports. Your team is going to be the people in the product you work directly with. consistently. And the last theme I'd really recommend when you think about what never goes out of style as a product marketer, always be curious and always be humble. You are going to need to ask questions. What made you really smart a month ago might be irrelevant in the next month. You're going to want to be curious and asking the social media team, what are you hearing in your customer support? The engineering team of why did you decide to prioritize this piece of the puzzle? And this will give you more and more points to put together as you consider the right things like the messaging framework or what's the next marketing campaign that might break through. And the final kind of combination of being humble, I would also combine with be a little confident as you are getting these insights. Don't be afraid to push into your point of view as you're presenting, but it's okay if you get that pushback and it feels like it's the right time to step off the gas a little bit. PMMs uniquely deal with multiple different seniorities. You might be the one product marketer on a product like I was when I was working on OneNote, but I was working with like the senior engineering organization, and then I was working with the junior marketing person all in the same day. So I had to really change my own levels of communication, confidence, and the way that I approach the conversation. And I bet you feel the same way in your job today for many of you, you know, listening to the session.
Absolutely. So what would be your advice to someone starting at a company with no existing product marketing function? And what are the first things you do to make sure that your role within the company evolves in the right direction?
I love this question because all of us product marketers, I think at some point or other, we've wanted to go to a startup, or we maybe joined one or at a mid-sized company, all those different pieces of the puzzle. And I think it's sort of natural for people, myself included, that I've spoken to as well. They're like, should a product marketer be an early hire? And that question, I think, is really, again, just sort of amorphous. And I hate to say it so often, but it depends.
Yeah.
So when I think about if there is no PMM function, regardless of the maturity or the organization, I would challenge you to think, if there's no PMM function by title, does that mean no one's doing the work? I would be willing to bet, and I'd love to hear from people if they feel differently. Do you think someone is actually doing the work under a different title? I think yes. There's probably a lot of different people that are moonlighting. They're sort of during the day, they are product managers now writing copy maybe, or they are people who are working the social media channels, feeding back those customer insights to the engineering organization. So first off, just again, be humble, acknowledge you have this skill set to bring to the company, but that doesn't mean someone hasn't been trying already. So go learn from them, figure out what you can, who has been putting together these different pieces, who's writing the framework, who's making the web copy, things of that nature. And as you figure out what's really happening already and what you're hearing from them, then you'll be able to apply some of those mindsets and traits that we noticed just a moment ago in the conversation here. Because when you start looking forward and saying, how do I believe I can help create a long-term healthy culture? A lot of it goes back to, in my opinion, some of those basic traits. Product marketers, by definition, in my experience and career, we are people that we want clear roles and responsibilities, but we are never afraid to roll up our sleeves. You know, there's not that many disciplines out there that I bet would be even more willing than we are as a function and as a business player to say, you know, I know that's not normally my job, but let's get it done together. Or I'll be the one to get it done this week. You handle it next week, hopefully. So if you have this idea of alignment and you focus on what you're trying to accomplish and you don't be afraid to say, I'll help with that today, you're going to put yourself into a good cultural mindset. And the last note I'd really focus on here is, as a product marketer, it is unfortunately too easy, in my opinion, to get stuck stepping back and saying, oh, we drive brand awareness. But why do we want to drive brand awareness? We drive customer usage. Sure, of course we should have usage, but why? We as product marketers will set ourselves up as employees and hopefully the organization and therefore the customer if we focus on outcomes that matter. I like to call this the so what mindset. If you're saying we as product marketers own brand awareness, I want to push you to say to yourself, so what? What happens if we have brand awareness? If we have brand awareness, the next time we do a marketing campaign, we believe we can get more people into the campaign, top of the funnel, so that we can convert them into users or buying subscriptions of our product, whatever the situation might be. So focus on outcomes that matter to you, and then back it up and figure out what the right metric is in the journey to decide, are you being successful at it as an organization?
Excellent. So how has the role of a product marketer evolved throughout your career?
Yeah, so when I first joined, I started off as actually a marketing communications manager at Microsoft, as I mentioned a little earlier with the subscription launch. So I was the person that I bet many people listening today got these very emails, it said, welcome to Office, here's some new tips and tricks, this is what's happening in the process. But as I moved a little upstream in the marketing cycle and closer to product marketing in roughly 2014, 2015, the truth is at Microsoft, and this might be surprising or obvious to people that also work is like product marketers today in the tech industry, you spend so much of your time just figuring out what is the engineering and product team building. You feel like you should have this great deep bond, but it actually feels like a little bit of a miracle every time they tell you in advance what's happening. So half of your career, it feels like, is spent running around. At Microsoft in Seattle, I quite literally was running inside of Microsoft's campus from building to building, trying not to be late to in-person meetings so that I could actually figure out the facts. And while today, of course, we do so much on Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever it might be, it really helped to build my credibility. There was no notion at Microsoft initially of this product marketer has some value to add. I would be shocked if people didn't agree in their career that they had this experience of how many times did somebody just throw over the fence to you a 95% done product and say, hey, I'm gonna go get an amazing campaign done. Get us 100 million eyeballs on this thing. I'm like, you can't do that. We're not gonna be successful. The point of me is to help you and help the business, right? So that was sort of the first thing that I learned was you need to just build this trust as a product marketer, no matter your style or approach. I would go, like I said, running to each building. I literally would go rock climbing with the PMs all the time, which wasn't a thing I was particularly interested in doing, but I figured maybe I'll have some fun while I get to know the team and they'll trust me as a normal, just like peer and friend, hopefully. And it was successful. It actually got to the point where there was a vice president at Microsoft, this woman, Laura Butler, who I really admire. She kind of called herself the cookie queen. And if she liked you, she would send cookies to your office as part of a thank you for being a good relationship. So I started to get cookies and notes, once a month from her, sort of just showing off I made it and I was welcome into the engineering organization, which was crazy. And so broader than just how great it was to eat a cookie and say they like you, let me give a real example of what it meant for the organization and what we could accomplish. So Microsoft, of course, acquired LinkedIn several years back now. I was fortunate enough at the time to be the Word PMM and partner with LinkedIn. We were building out this whole concept around how can you create resumes more efficiently and intelligently in Word with sort of the advice of LinkedIn piling in. And sort of long story short, because I had this trust and this relationship with the engineering organization at Microsoft and at LinkedIn at the time, we were able to actually plan so much farther in advance than normal. We got our retail organization involved, the Microsoft stores, and started to create all different resume workshops right inside of the physical stores, which led to an uptick in sales, which is pretty unique for a single feature, no matter how big the feature is, so to speak, to actually do it. And that was because of trust and building that tight-knit relationship with your engineering organization. So that was sort of really the first half of product marketing in my personal career here. As I move on to Qualtrics, I really tried to take with me a lot of that marketing and product-led mindset. And I honestly learned that Qualtrics is more of a sales-led organization, meaning a company like Microsoft is engineering or product-led. Like you think of the original, Bill Gates, of course, it's always about hopefully how good is the product. Apple is design-led, the UX. Qualtrics, frankly, was and is mostly sales-led. We do it in service of our customers, but it's about the sales organization thinks we can go in this direction. We think we can make this pitch, and customers are enjoying that pitch. So we keep doing it, we keep building it as we know what they want. Mm-hmm. But as I moved over to the Qualtrics and sales mindset, you learn how to think more and more about driving pipeline, every single piece of the puzzle. Where Microsoft had this mindset of marketing led. It was a lot of what's the best blog that we can do? What's the interview we can land in a TechCrunch or The Verge, whatever it might be. But at Qualtrics, I realized in my experience, you can focus a lot more on the bigger business numbers we were sort of talking about before, and you can see the broader picture. That's always going to be easier at a smaller organization, though, to be transparent with everybody here, of course. But even at a big organization, you can take that mindset and remember you own an actual outcome as part of a broader team, of course, but always remember what you're focusing on. And I think earlier in my career, I got a little stuck thinking about just, to my point before, did this blog post get 1,000 views? Maybe, but why do we care? What's the call to action? All of those end-to-end campaigns. So that's how my career sort of evolved in the PMM space.
So over the years, have you seen an evolution in the role in terms of growth marketing? So where once a PMM might have been focused on a go-to-market, do you think that the role is now also about sustained customer growth?
I think this is really one of those, it depends where the company is at. It depends what industry you're in. Are you in manufacturing, in high tech, in retail? And are you early phase as a company, or are you well established? Really just a long way of saying, I think the key goals, the outcomes, again, of the growth organization in partnership with product marketing, they'll always be pretty consistent. We want to get prospects into the funnel. We want to convert them into users, and then we want to keep them happy so that they'll renew, maybe expand their opportunity and tell other people about it. But it really goes back to that same idea of you've got to be clear in your original role and responsibility, but be willing to lean in. I know at Qualtrics, for me as an example, when I first joined the company as a somewhat early hire in marketing, we didn't really have growth marketers yet. So myself and my colleagues that had background experience, we would lean in. So what was unique at the time, I would write the campaign, I'd get some feedback on it, and then I would literally write the copy. Like, you don't expect to be doing all those things at the same time in your career, especially at the time when there's about 1,700 employees. It felt counterintuitive to me for the maturity, but the marketing department was immature, even if the company was a bit more mature. So, the point of view I'd have on this is, I think it's certainly evolving, but if you still have that same core mindset of what your goals are, you're always going to be able to be a good partner to the organization and those colleagues of yours.
Absolutely. So often people pivot into product marketing from sales, product management, or a different function of marketing. Does one area have an advantage over the other when it comes to taking on a role of a product marketer, do you think?
Yeah, this might come as no surprise to you, Emma, or anyone listening and joining us today by the nature of the talk. No, I really don't think so. I think the whole idea is that you are bringing a background that is hopefully somewhat unique. You're trying to bring diversity to the workplace, whether that's, of course, across geological, racial background, or different skill sets that you might have. You need these different blends of people and talents to actually be successful. And while bringing different backgrounds together, reports show consistently from like McKinsey and Forrester and whatnot, it might take a little longer for you to be a part of the organization and the whole organization to really be moving quickly and efficiently. Over time, diverse teams always outperform a homogenous team. So I do not think there is one unique background that is talented or better as a PMM to pivot into, but I am confident in saying that we should always have multiple different types of backgrounds and bring that diversity to play. The other note I'll really point out on this idea here is, as a product marketer, we're talking a lot about how you have to be the go-between in all these different organizations. So you need to have a skill set and competence in a lot of different areas. But stop and think for a second, what does that mean? It does not mean you have to know how to go be a digital marketer in your career, or you have to be able to go be a sales leader. What it really means is, do you have the ability to be conversational? Can you check in and ask someone questions about their work stream? Can you give a smart point of view? And can you sometimes push back depending on the advice that they are giving for your strategy here? So at the end of the day, you kind of want to know what are some of your super strengths, your superpowers, and lean into those. But you want to be conscious of not having too many total blind spots. And when you figure out those blind spots based on feedback, if you are coming from, let's say you were coming from like my career, I came from marketing communications originally. So I was able to lean into anything email-based, copy-based, but I did not know a lot about sales or project management as an example. So I had to figure out, how do I keep this sort of strength, this marketing communication strength, healthy, and just slowly move things from being weaknesses to frankly being adequate. Not everything has to be the reason you're going to save the world in your professional experience. Some are just, hey, can Scott now better manage a schedule so all 10 of us can get to where we need to go? Yes, he now can. He didn't used to know how to do that. So at the end of the day, I'd say focus on diversity, start by leaning into some strengths so you can add value, get wins, and get your own confidence up as you're learning how to shore up some of those blind spots. But don't be afraid of what your background is if your interest and excitement is in the product marketing space.
Okay, so what can a product-focused PMM learn from a PMM that's more sales-led or vice versa?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different skills and learnings from both sides of the house here. When I think about a sales-led PMM, I think they uniquely understand the journey from the customer's perspective. How do you go from consideration to deeper learning into sealing the deal? In a B2C world, it might be downloading the app or checking out on your digital website. B2B, it's signing the contract. On the product side of the house, sometimes we miss that concept of what do you really own or influence? Product PMMs, I think they sometimes get distracted by getting excited about the idea of driving usage. But the truth is, and you need to be honest with yourself, do you drive usage through a blog post or do you drive usage through deep ingrained like user habits you can help encourage in the product? So I think sales PMMs can really give that advice to a product PMM. In reverse, I think something that we can really learn if you are figuring out as a product PMM what you can do, it's this notion of being honest as well with what can the product truly do. Mm-hmm. Sales PMMs get ahead of themselves. It's exciting sometimes and it makes customers happy, but it puts us in a bind. Sales PMM speaks to like a 6 to 12 month vision of these incredible things that are coming. And then by the time you ship them, you're saying to yourself as a customer, yeah, I heard about that at last year's conference. Now it's in my hands. What else are you building? Your engineering team is saying to you, are you kidding? That was the big thing. Give us a break. We're working on the next thing now. You know, a quick example I'll give you for that. I helped to launch the first Microsoft Office apps on iOS and Android. They were kind of bad, simple apps. Arguably, they were really just good at viewing your documents. But we came out with this huge pitch, this mindset of you can do anything, Office on the go. It's on your mobile app. How amazing is this? But you really couldn't do those features. So when engineering built the second version and they were like, go get them, go show up the story, we had the same story to tell. And I'm left sitting here with like, but we told that story. This was the value prop. And now you're just actually making it possible to do the things I promised. So it put us in a bind. It was this weird situation where we had to, if I could go back, I would say, be more honest and figure out the benefit of the true product story. And so that's a thing that I think sales folks can really learn from product-led folks.
So while there's many ways to be a great product marketer, there are some pitfalls to avoid as well. So what are your biggest no's?
When I think about what could kind of go wrong, you know, we've been talking a lot about how to do well, but, you know, what could maybe go wrong as a product marketer? I think the number one thing I see, particularly from people of any discipline, honestly, earlier in career that I'll mentor and work with, is they always have this question of, hey, Scott, when do I bring my ideas to the table? People like think there's going to be this like flashing light, like Vegas moment where they say, hey, Emma, you're brilliant. What's your point of view on the topic? Why are you unique with your ideas? That is almost never going to happen. But that doesn't mean you don't have awesome ideas. Mm-hmm. You just need to figure out when to talk about them. You know, I worked with a person earlier in my career, and honestly, things didn't go that well for him when he transitioned to the org. 6 months in, he was frustrated. I was checking in and he was like, but I was the data guy. I want to be the A/B test guy. Why is no one letting me do testing? That was supposed to be my super strength. And what I had to realize, and I try to pay forward now, this mindset is, if you think you're the data wonk or the testing wonk, again, no one's going to ask you, what are your 3,000 tests and matrices and game plan? Mm-hmm. When you're working on the pieces that you already own and with your colleagues, build a test in, talk about it. And the more that you ingratiate that culture and mindset, the more people will trust that you can accomplish this, or they'll maybe borrow it from you and be influenced by it. You know, whatever that situation might be, bring it to the table. The other thing I think people kind of forget about if they're being a PMM and making some mistakes, honestly, is they don't talk to their customers. If you're getting your customer insights from a like once per quarter, one round table, this was this one quote I really liked, and now I'm walking the halls and I'm telling people I heard this thing, you're missing out. You're not going to really know what's happening consistently enough. Like you've got to figure out ways to set up regular routine opportunities to speak to a customer. If you're in a big organization or high tech, you might just get to get on the phone with them and see who a sales prospect is and do a ride along with your sales customer. Read customer reviews. All of these different things are customer insights. But if you're not hearing from your customer at least every few weeks and bringing some of those insights to the people around you, you're really falling into this pitfall of, yeah, I studied up in January what my customer is like. And now that it's November, I still know everything about them. You're missing the ball game. Mm-hmm. And just the last thing I'd really recommend here is, we talked about this earlier, but be curious. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And yes, there is a difference between a 30-person meeting with the VP of your company where you're trying to drive to a critical outcome. That's not the time to say, hey, what's that acronym stand for? But look for the people who are willing to give advice. Find some one-on-one meetings, find some smaller groups of people who naturally want to be confidants, be colleagues that are trying to grow with you. So ask questions, be curious, and lean in and use what you're learning along the way.
Okay, so if you want to change from being sales-led to product-led, what would your tips on how to educate and motivate the team around you in that transition be?
The first thought here I really have is, can you answer why you think that's better for the business? If you don't know why you think being product-led is better for the business, it doesn't really matter what you do, because then you're just doing a thing that you might personally believe is more advantageous to your career, more interesting, or you can't back it up. One thing I learned in my career, and I've really tried to bring with me, is this idea of you have to first agree on facts. You have to understand with people, where are we today? Then you need to paint a vision of, where do we want to go? And do we agree where we are and where we want to go? Okay, we've got these 2 steps down. Then we can build a plan of how to get there. Because once you agree on those 2 facts, it gets harder to, you're not debating each other personally or your styles or saying my role is more important than your role. You're agreeing on a vision you're excited to bring to your company and to your customers. And then over time, as you're able to demonstrate those outcomes being beneficial, you'll be creating new culture, new norms, and hopefully it keeps on transitioning to a way that serves the customer and serves the business.
Okay, so if you're an inexperienced product marketer, what's the best way to identify what your strengths are so that you can use them in your career and your pitch?
One of the first things I really encourage anybody to do is take a hard look at your day professionally, whether that's through your inbox, you like doing it, or your Google Calendar, whatever. And be honest, what is exciting you and what is draining you? What are the tasks that you're like, let's get in there and do this today? Mm-hmm. I'm not pretending that that expression really is true of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. If that's who you are, that's amazing. I hope to be you someday. I genuinely do. We're just not there yet. But that doesn't mean that nothing makes you excited. I was thrilled to get the opportunity to speak with you today, Emma, and the broader people.
Oh, likewise. Yeah. Absolutely. That's not to say we don't enjoy what we do.
Exactly. No. So you got to think about what excites you and then what is bogging you down. My fiance calls them ankle biters. They're things that are just always kind of biting at her that she knows won't take long, but she hates them and she can't stand them. Run towards things that excite you and away from things that drain you. Mm-hmm. That might not tell you what you're best at, but it'll tell you a bit of who you are today and what you're trying to build into your own brand. So you can identify, what are those skills? What are those strengths? And what do you want to keep developing? And then, the last thing, we talked about it a little earlier, but I'd really emphasize again, you can ask people. I know that sounds like you're breaking some imaginary rule, but there really aren't that many rules. There's norms, and you should always be a good person, be ethical. Whatever those things mean to you, follow them. and your mileage may vary. What works for me personally might not work for you. But within reason, you can always ask these questions. You could say to your current boss, your peers, or if you're new to your industry, ask some friends or some volunteer work you've done. You're like, hey, what have you appreciated about my style? What's maybe a little abrasive that I want to dial back where I can? You'll find themes, you'll find consistent concepts, and then you'll be able to have examples. You know, how many people have you spoken with or seen some quote and they say, I'm collaborative, I work with people well. We're like, yeah, if you couldn't work with people well, you know, in this era, you're not going to have a lot of like jobs that product marketers want. So what are your examples? Have them in your back pocket and go back to that idea of what are outcomes you can uniquely offer, and know that, hey, if I walk into this interview or this meeting, Scott is going to say a sentence different than Emma, and both might be valuable of what they offer here. So ask people to describe you in a couple of words, look back in your professional feedback that you've gotten or your friend feedback, and just focus on what excites you. You want to run to something, not away from something, if you're able to create that opportunity or be fortunate enough to get that opportunity from different pieces of your career.
Excellent. I think that's some really invaluable advice to close the session on. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Scott.
Yeah.
It was
Emma,
so
it was
nice to
a
speak to
pleasure.
you.
Yeah, it was great to get to speak with you today. I hope people found some interesting advice, some insights along the way, and I can't wait to learn from all of you what's helpful here and what advice do you have for me as well. I'm really glad to be a part of this opportunity today and join the conference. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Scott. Bye.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways,
charts,
things are kind of the same.
as fast as we can.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is. And that
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Hi, and welcome to today's panel discussion. I'm your host, Tamara Germinski, and I'm the VP of Strategic Growth at Unbounce. Today, I'm joined by an unbelievable panel of guests who are going to spill the tea on all things category creation. Would you love to introduce yourself to everyone who's watching today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Stuart Schindler. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Tink. We're an fintech open banking platform based out of Stockholm in Sweden. I've been there for 2 years leading that function, and prior to that with 4 years with Klarna, introducing product marketing there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Kant. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing at Zendesk. We produce customer service, sales, and engagement products. I've been in product marketing for over a decade at companies like Salesforce, ThoughtSpot, and now Zendesk. I'm super excited to be here with all of you today to talk about this topic.
Sheena, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sheena Badani. I'm Senior Director of Marketing at Gong. I specifically lead category creation and category design for the company. I've been there about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I have spent my time at a variety of high growth companies, doing business development at LinkedIn and MongoDB. Started my career out in strategy consulting. So excited to be here, and thanks for having me on the panel.
Of course. And last but not least, Cody.
Hey, everybody. My name is Cody Bernard, and I'm a Senior Manager of Product Marketing at Drift. We provide revenue acceleration software, helping businesses buy from businesses and removing friction from the B2B buying process, which we know there is a lot of. I've had my hand in everything from early stage startups like Drift to more later stage companies like LogMeIn. And I have been working in product marketing for just shy of a decade right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I can't wait to hear your perspectives on this topic. And let's just jump right on into it. So first up, can everyone walk us through what was your aha moment with category creation? Did you set out to actually create a category, or did you just identify that maybe there was a gap in the market that you were uniquely positioned to fill? Lisa, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So I can't say that I've had many aha moments or in category creation. I think it's been a little bit more of once you get started and once you start to think about positioning your product and where you feel that it fits, starting to recognize that there's actually a hole that you need to go after. That being said, I actually say category creation to me doesn't feel quite like the right name. I think of it a little bit more like category creating, because it's such an ongoing process where it's not that you set out to create a new category and then check mark, you've done it. There's just a ton of work from, pre-launch to, post and beyond that you're constantly going through.
That's amazing. Okay, we're going to dig into a few of those topics after. But Cody, I'd love to hear, did you have an aha moment?
Yeah, I think for us, it was more like along the lines of both. We realized that there was this shift in the market, that there was an opportunity presented for us, which was this unification of revenue teams. So sales, marketing, customer success. And it was something with our previous category, conversational marketing, we were only really focusing on one aspect of it. So this was a really good idea for us to go and figure out how can we serve all of these different types of audiences when we're seeing out there that companies are actually bringing these teams together. And then there's also this other thing, and Lisa, I think you kind of nailed it perfectly, where you have this category that you create, but then it's so ongoing. You need to go and then lead the category. You need to go and then win the category. And then you get to a point where the category has kind of run its course and you need to redefine that. So what does that look like? Do you need to elevate it? Do you need to change it to something completely different? And that's at least where we were coming from when we were looking at revenue acceleration as our new category.
That's super interesting. And Sheena, what about for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think the journey started before I even joined the company. Like it started with this identification of a gap in the market. There was a problem, and our co-founders realized they had a vision, right? They had a vision that there was a better way for your sales team to operate based on reality and not based on anecdotes and opinions. And their approach was, okay, let's build a product, let's solve this problem in the market and drive that traction with customers. And once that was going, then there was a point where, hey, we have to start to get the word out more. We need to educate the market about this new way. And that's kind of where the concept of category even came up. They were not set out to necessarily create a category. It was really to build a company and solve problems. So the team actually kind of took a bet about early on into the company's life cycle of, hey, we could try to build this category ourselves and have it as a function of the CMO and the CEO, who are highly critical to the process of building a category. But they said, let's take a bet and hire somebody who's 100% dedicated to designing that process around it, because it is ongoing, as everyone has mentioned. So that's kind of how it happened. I mean, I think it's a process. It's not about building the category per se. It's about solving those problems.
I think that's a really important point. And Stuart, all right, tell us about your aha moment or how category creation has evolved for you in the past.
Maybe a slightly different angle again for me. Not so much of an aha moment as like two phases to it. Initially, Think existed as a consumer app. First, recognizing that there was a need that wasn't being met by existing financial services and banks. So it started off challenging the banks by producing a PFM, personal finance management app, where you could handle all your finances. That required connecting to the infrastructure of the banks. And then there was a pivot moment where there was a realization that this need for consumers was something that the banks also were going to need to deliver to themselves. And we had a pivot from B2C to B2B. We realized the product was actually a platform, and we could build an infrastructure and serve data products to the very people we used to be challenging. And that combined with mega trends in the industry around the shift in legislation. Here in Europe, we have the PSD2 directive that meant that there was a shift in data ownership. So there was this opportunity for consumers to be better served by financial services, but the companies weren't there. The category didn't exist prior to this open banking platform. So there was a need to create the category that kind of ironically was maybe triggered by being that challenger on the outside first.
Amazing, thank you. So one thing I heard from all of you was that this is not something that necessarily everyone set out to be like, I want to build a new category. What is that category? And then go found it. Everyone kind of identified that there is a customer problem or market problem that each of your companies were uniquely qualified to solve. I'd love to dig into a little bit about how did recognizing that change how you were selling your product? Because I think for almost all of the products, they were already in business in some form before kind of shifting into this new category creation. Was this like, hey, we are going to spin up a second team who's going to try selling and building this separate category while we keep the main business running? Or was this like an iterative category creation process? I'd love to just dig a bit deeper into that. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Sure. So I'm happy to start. And I do think what's interesting is, hearing what everyone was saying, while there definitely wasn't an aha moment for me, and it sounds like really for any of us, there is a moment where you have to decide if you're going to go for it. And that is interesting. So, I think in my past two companies, both Zendesk and the prior company, I would say a lot of what we did was around category creation. And I remember, with Zendesk, when we were getting ready to launch our Sunshine platform, there was a big question around how do we want to talk about ourselves? And do we want to talk about ourselves in terms of sort of the traditional platforms to date, or do we want to come out with a new way to talk, a new category, right? And so we did have to make that decision. And when we made the decision to sort of go all in and call ourselves a CRM platform, which at the time no one was really using that term, we did create a bit of, I'll call it like a tiger team, to kind of swarm around and figure out what that would mean. So I do think in order to do it right, you have to, at least if you're in, for us, we were in a subset of a larger organization, we had to create the space to dedicate to figuring out what that would mean and how we were going to bring it to market differently.
Right. So it's a purposeful, intentional thing you're going to do, but it's kind of something that evolves as you go. But at some point you do actually need to be like, I'm in or I'm out.
Absolutely.
Was that similar for others here, or how did that change how you were running your day-to-day business versus how you were going after this new category?
So for us, it was a little bit of a different situation where we had a single product. The market had started to use terminology to describe what we were doing as conversation intelligence. And we were using that as well. And around that time when I joined, we were at this pivotal point where like, hey, like we do so much more than just conversation intelligence. Like we felt like we had outgrown that nomenclature. And as we looked into our roadmap, there was so much more coming down the pipe that we felt like we kind of outgrew that category in some ways. And so that was like, similarly, we had to make a call. Like, are we sticking with this name and sticking with this category that exists? Or is there something else that we should be that can better resonate with who we're trying to reach with our target buyers? And so that was kind of like that decision-making point of where we had to make a call and invest and really build out and then launch the new category.
And how important is the name of a new category? Because I've heard both of you now mention, hey, we are hearing different things in the market. We were talking about how we're positioning ourselves. And to me, that goes down to the language we use to describe, both what we're offering and what we bring to the market. Was there discussions around this? What are we going to call it? Here's option 1, option 2, we're going to test that. Or maybe Sheena, to your point, were people already using some language and you were picking up on that and evolving that?
There was, for us, there was constant questioning it and defining what should this category be, what should it be known as, and while you want to try and be creative and maybe take some kind of ownership and put something maybe that's quite unique on it, I think that ultimately, as it's evolving, if people are beginning to form a vocabulary, in our case, there was quite a lot of legislation in place that is how people were forming their decision as to whether or not they needed to invest in the area. We realized that the category naming was something that we should not try and necessarily make too abstract. It needs to be focused around the problem that people are realizing that they have, that you can solve. And then you have an opportunity to be, I think, a strong brand in a very sort of strong solution in a very problem-focused category name. So I think it's settled with open banking for us as the category, which wasn't of our creation, but fighting against it and trying to do something different wouldn't have been in our benefit, I don't think.
Got it. Did anyone else have a different perspective or a different experience in that process of coming up with a name? I know even for myself, when we're launching new products or features, the naming process can be so contentious and difficult, right? Because you want to get that balance of something that is unique, but also something that's clear and resonates with customers. And it just makes it obvious, of course, that is what it is.
Naming's really hard when you think about it, because the second something sounds good internally, it's going to stick. And with category creation, I think it's a little bit different than a feature, because that's something that you're going to be known as a business, right? Like you're going to be serving a specific group of people within that category. So you do need to kind of sit on it a little bit, test out, is this something that resonates with the market? That at least was like the case for us, because I know I've made some mistakes in naming in my past with products and features. And the funny thing about with Drift early on, this was before my time, but with conversational marketing, I know that our co-founders hated it. They didn't like it. They thought it sounded a little bit weird. And the way that it came to be was like they started using conversation-driven marketing in a lot of their copy. So everything from emails and website and all of that, where eventually customers took that and then relayed it back to us as conversational marketing. And then we realized, okay, great, we're going to leverage that voice of the customer and just go with that. And it stuck. And when it came to looking at revenue acceleration, when we just rebranded or recreated or created that new category, we didn't want to lose conversational marketing because it's still a core pillar of what we do. So what we did is we actually leveraged that underneath our overarching category. So now we have conversational marketing and conversational sales, and those two things fuel our bigger category.
I love the idea of really making sure that the voice of customer is represented in the name of the category. It makes total sense. Go ahead, Stuart. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to add that you also need to be thinking quite far ahead, because initially your conversations are based around what people's current perception is, and that's based on their previous experiences. And you can get examples of, if you name the category after what the current solution is, rather than what the problem space is, it's going to be tied to something that is going to need to evolve in of itself. So you need to leave space, I think, for your own solution to grow and develop and add different products within that category, rather than it being like, what is the solution today? What are the features today? Because that will seem dated quite quickly.
Totally. And, I'm assuming if you're also thinking about category creation, you're thinking about new market opportunities, which means you also want to be speaking to prospects who are not your existing customers, right? And so voice of customer, how does that get reflected from market, from prospective customers, other markets that you might want to go after? Thinking very, future focused. A few of you have mentioned kind of the differences between, when you've named a product versus a category, or when you've brought something to market. How has the launch of a category differed from the launch of a product or feature for you? Is this something that you plan internally? Like, we are going to launch this category. This is the launch day. Here's the go-to-market plan. Or is it something that does evolve a bit more iteratively and naturally? I'd love to dig into that a bit more.
I'm happy to jump into this first. So from my perspective, it's very similar. Like we wanted to take a moment and make a splash around the actual announcement of this category. And this took months. It took months to plan, just like you would a product launch. So, we planned a few months ahead of time. We put a stake in the ground. We're having our first customer conference, which was in person at that time. And so we knew we had that stake in the ground. We kind of had to work backwards. Like that's going to be the moment where we unveil this to the world. It's not going to be the moment that the category is huge and big and thriving and flourishing, but like that's when we can just unveil it and start to educate the market about what this is. And then, kind of working backwards and building towards it, it was like all the things that you would do for a launch, right? Like we had to figure out what assets do we want to create? What is the keynote going to look like? How are we messaging and positioning this category? Who's involved? It's a cross-functional effort across the company. And then beyond the announcement, then the real ongoing work starts. And how do you drive that adoption? How do you drive the adoption of customers using that language that you just put out there? Other analysts and other influencers using that language, and hearing it from the voice of your customer, which we were able to track that through our own product through Gong. Generally, like I would say, it's very, very similar process.
I think that makes sense. What was the process like for others here?
Yeah, I would say that, I 100% agree. Sort of all of the activities around a launch are incredibly similar. Some of the things that stick out to me that are different are all around education, both internally and externally. In fact, there's a ton of internal education that you have to do because oftentimes you're not using, for lack of a better term, made up words, right? You're using words that people already know in a certain context, and you're trying to repurpose them. And so there's a lot of education internally around how we're going to use these terms, and trying to think through sort of all of the ways, especially at a large organization where you have many, many different people, right? A global organization, that are going to take your sort of source messaging and positioning and translate it. And so you have to be really diligent about making sure that everyone understands, and then continuing to iterate as new use cases, new formats come up. And then once you've launched it, I think it's the same thing, right? Now you're educating a market on what this thing means, how to talk about it, your unique point of view. So I think that side of the launch is a bit different.
Right. So a lot of heavy lifting from an internal enablement perspective.
I could also, you both said education there, and I completely agree. And I think that there's also sometimes an extra layer of complexity and challenge to be aware of. Depends who you're selling to and how established they are in their thinking and the education that's needed. But in our case, I think that one of the earliest challenges we had was the industry we're selling to is hundreds of years old. Like, banking is very set in its ways. And some of our most important customers, we were needing to deal with like a procurement process and RFPs that just didn't have a box to fill in what we needed them to know about. So there was a sort of a degree of educating the industry so that they were asking the questions that we wanted to be able to answer as well.
Totally, I love that. And Cody, you're going to jump in and say something earlier.
I was going to say, I think I would probably argue that internal enablement is probably the most important thing that you need to do, at least when you're looking at creating a new category, because in the beginning, yes, you can have a big splash on launch day. You can have your press release, you can get placements in media outlets and all of that. But I mean, your internal people are the people who are going to be communicating this, and that's your biggest resource in the beginning. It's going to take some time to build up that groundswell out in the market. Obviously, if you have a really big brand, it's a lot easier to do that, but you need everybody speaking the same way. You need the message to be coming across in a very consistent way. And if you can't nail that, then a lot of the times you're going to struggle, because then you're going out to market with a bunch of different messages, and it just makes it harder for people to resonate with that strategic narrative of that category that you've created.
Totally. And how have you handled maybe internal feedback or internal questions around the balance between serving the existing customers we have today with the solution that they purchased versus this idea of, wanting to lead them to what you probably believe is going to be an even better way to solve their problems. But, if you're someone who's working at the company and you're just focused on solving this customer's problem, maybe you imagine you work in customer support and you're picking up the phone every day and they're like, we need to solve this problem. We need to build this feature. But the product marketing team is saying, hey, we actually need to create a whole new category and it's going to be called something else. And it doesn't even matter about that feature because we're going to give them this value. How do you handle that as part of the internal enablement process?
I think that, just comes down to the assets that you can arm your CSMs or your support team with, so that they know where are the gaps in knowledge with my existing customers. So if it's on the product side, if we're launching a new category, usually there's some level of functionality or product that comes with that. So you can basically enable them to be able to talk to that effectively and show what the workflows are or the benefits are of that specific thing that you're going to be delivering to the customer, so that it can go proactively engage with that customer. And I think it all comes down to basically just being able to create really easy to understand messaging that you can then leverage across all of the different channels or assets that you're going to use to train your team, to train your customers.
Yeah, I would also say it probably goes to this idea that, in product marketing, what I've seen is there's always a tendency to want to launch and move on, right? You're like, launch, and then you're like, what's the next big thing? What am I launching next? We know we tell someone something once and they retain 10% of what we say. And with category creation, I think that's even more important. You have to keep saying this message over and over and over again to the market so it sticks. And so, in that sense, I think there is a lot of resistance usually internally to use new phrases that customers don't understand, especially if you have a strong sales team, right? Because they're going to want to talk to customers in the language the customer is speaking in. And so I think there's a little bit of, kind of the MVP, getting started launch, where you you start to talk about things, you start to get your sales team on board, and over time, you really get to then go bigger and get people sort of talking in your language. But it's very hard, I think, to convince sales and convince some of your internal stakeholders that this new way of speaking is the way to go.
I think that makes sense. So we've talked a little bit about getting traction internally, but I'd love to turn to talking about getting traction externally. Talk to me a little bit about the timeline you guys saw from the time that you had this launch where you introduced the term or the new category. How long did it take before analysts or customers or influencers started adopting this technology or this terminology rather? Was that something that came quickly, or was that a really long process?
So I can comment, we're still in that process. It's category creation is a very long game. You can't expect, or it would be very hard to expect that analysts and everybody else is going to pick up your language right away. Because you're working with other folks externally that have their own priorities. So analysts often create their own language and terminology for how they describe a category. Like that's what they're known to do. They take some pride in that. Similarly, customers, they are not necessarily using the jargon that vendors may develop and create. They have their own way of speaking. So for us, like we tried our best to just get the word out, get the terminology out, the vision out as much as possible, like in some ways, like over communicating, over inundating the message. We started to see pick up from our customers, from some industry folks that we're interacting with over the first 6 months, I would say. Initially, there was confusion. There were folks that were using the old, the conversation intelligence, not the revenue intelligence language, and that still happens today. No, they're not wrong, right? Like we can't expect that everyone's going to start using our language right away. But that's why it's an ongoing effort where we have to continuously invest, continuously educate, and prioritize.
Yeah, I think one way you can try and I'm not going to say shorten, because you're absolutely right, it's a really long game, but one way you can try to accelerate things a little bit is leaning on partners and sometimes even your competition. It's going to take a long time, as you were saying, Sheena, for analysts and I think customers to start to use your language. But if you can start to lean on your partners, and if you pick something really good, sometimes you'll see your competition pick it up. And in many ways, that's great because it's validating that this really is a thing that people need to pay attention to.
Totally agree.
I think that makes sense. And so, okay, we can expect that it's going to be a long game before everyone's adopting the terminology. What are some other things you could be looking towards to indicate that you're making, progress in the creation of the category? What would those success metrics look like?
It's a really tough question.
Toughy.
I mean, it depends. If we were talking just now about how it's a long game, you need to be embracing your partners and your competitors, and you want the category naming and the vocabulary to be sticking and picked up by other people. So a lot of the success metrics would be things that you're not actually necessarily in a position to measure yourselves. Maybe it becomes closer to like brand measurement. You want to be seeing how much keywords are being used, but not just like those that are driving traffic to you, but are maybe being used like across the whole industry. How many articles, how many references in publications are using this vocabulary, are referring to this new category, but you're not necessarily connected to them enough to be able to measure them. So quite a lot of it's probably quite anecdotal. And you hear it quite often, or we do, certainly in the enterprise sales, when it's such a long sales cycle, that you do hear back from the sales team going, yeah, they're saying our own stuff back to us more and more often. And we're getting people who, in an RFP, they come with questions from one of our competitors, and we're recognizing the terms and the words that's appearing there that's been given to them by our competitors as well. So maybe it's not such hard metrics, but they're ear to the ground, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence maybe.
Yeah, we track share of voice, like I think everybody does for the most part, and that's helpful, I think, in the beginning. But our biggest metric around this, at least what we were looking at, that was more on the tactical side, was listening to Gong calls. Sheena, great product. It literally, we looked at revenue acceleration keywords, right, through like a specific time frame, and then when we actually launched through to a point in time, and we continuously track that. So we can see, is this something that's being brought up on more calls? Great, that means we're doing a really good job on our marketing side, but also our enablement internally with sales and CS, because they're pushing it out to their customers as well. So that's at least how we track it too. And then obviously everything from placements and how many times we get picked up by press and all of that, that's icing on the cake.
I love that. So there's the market view, you know, share of voice, but also, hey, is our marketing being effective? When people come to me, are they bringing up that terminology? So you can almost measure like percent of all prospects who bring it up on their own, or percent that it comes up in those conversations. That's a really neat one. Lisa, it looked like you were going to maybe say something as well.
Oh, just I agree with sort of all those points where we look at a lot of top of funnel metrics. We look at, sort of, you can do like brand tracker, right? And, what phrases are associated with your brand. You look at SEO terms, earned media, things like that. It is certainly, those higher level metrics though, versus things like, revenue or pipeline. You can certainly look at what your campaigns are driving, but I don't think those are going to be effectively correlated with how much penetration into a new category you're creating.
The other thing that we did, like in some of the early days, was try to break down the initiatives in place to help build the category and track some of that, because some of the other top level metrics will take time and it can be harder to measure. So for example, we launched a podcast that was all about revenue intelligence. So having like monthly metrics on unique listeners and downloads for the podcast. We created some assets about the category. So tracking the downloads and the click-throughs and conversions on those type of assets that are about the category. Those help give a little bit of indication and some kind of nearer term wins, you could say.
Yeah, so at least you can feel like you're making some progress, right? Amazing. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching today and thinking, should I be considering category creation? I'd love to hear everyone's perspective on what are those signals that may indicate that you should be considering category creation and branching off from the existing category that you're in today. Or on the inverse, what are the signals that are, hey, that's not something you should be considering at all? Oh, Stuart, I think you're on mute still.
Zoom bingo.
Life.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll go first, but I was on mute, so it didn't work. But I think there's a couple of key. I think if you're a startup, if you're not challenging, then you're a category, then you're creating one. And an indicator is often, is there a clear incumbent in place that you are challenging? If not, there is an opportunity there. And you should jump on that opportunity like 2 feet first, as quickly as you can, to be ahead of creating that category, because there's space for it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just finished up the book, the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and the first law being law of leadership. And obviously, if you have the ability to own a category, that's great. But if you need to carve out your own niche, that's when the second law comes in with this law of category. So that I think you might not be at a point where you can win a massive crowded market. So you can go and have this opportunity to really create something new and something that resonates with other people, and then have everybody follow suit, ideally, right? Like as you create that category and as it gets bigger. So I think obviously those signals are your customers pulling you in that direction. So you can say, my customers, they see me as a resource to solve this specific problem the best. Okay, great. Let's go double down on that. And that's a way that you can carve out a niche. So just understanding where your customers want to take you, and then taking that problem and creating a vision of how you can go solve that problem, and then iterate on it and innovate on it continuously over time.
Got it.
Yeah. One thing I would say, and we didn't talk as much about it in this conversation, is, there are times when creating a new category can undermine what you're trying to do. Right. And so I think you have to look not just for, is there a gap you're trying to fill, but is there also some momentum in this space? because I think that if you are completely there by yourself, it is going to be a very long and hard road to climb. And so, I've been part of launches where we've decided, it's not, the right time or space or for a number of reasons to go completely sort of off the reservation. And so I think looking to sort of what the competition is doing, who else is out in the market, are there other people that could sort of be part of this, an ecosystem of this new category you're creating? If so, that's a great time to, I think, make a first step, because you want some people there to help support you.
Yeah, and a couple other pointers. As we've talked about building a category, it's a long game. It's not for the faint of heart. So you have to have, resources. You have to have team. You have to have time that you can dedicate to this effort. Like, it's not going to happen on its own. If you're a small company with, stealth company with 5 folks, or, a seed company, it may not be the right time. At that time, you should really be focused on identifying the pain in the market and building for that pain. And maybe later in your life cycle where it may make more sense for that. So really having that, the ability to identify whether or not you have that buy-in, you have the resources is really critical on this journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing all of your perspectives today. It was so invaluable. And thank you to everyone who's watching. Please follow all of these amazing panelists on Twitter, or check them out on LinkedIn if you want to hear more about their thoughts on category creation or product marketing or go-to-market. And we hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference as well. Bye for now.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways, things are kind of the same.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is.
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Hi, my name is Daniel Cooperman. I'm the head of product marketing for Duraline at Atlassian. Next few minutes, I want to talk to you today about some product marketing plays that you can use to boost your remote work efficiency. So I think I don't have to belabor the point that we all have felt the impact of working from home due to the pandemic for the past few months. And it impacts in terms of higher levels of stress, whether working from home with family or especially in isolation as you can't see people. But when it comes to all of the things that happen over the water cooler, when you can get together with other people to do some whiteboarding exercises on an ad hoc basis, or even just swivel your chair and ask people questions and get together for an impromptu meeting, all of these things are over. The remote working situation that we all are in today require a little bit of different thinking, but also requires you to have a better coordination among your team and better collaboration across other team members. Interesting to note that I think the traditional team forming phases that we're so familiar with on forming, storming, norming, and performing can now be translated to probably something what I have here on the screen on Zoom as people are trying to get used to how do we collaborate, how do we become more effective when we're all working remotely, and we have our personal lives sometimes even interfering when we're trying to get meetings going or even work with other people. So here's what I propose for you to do right now. Take a pen and paper and start off jotting down some of the ideas I'm going to give you if you think they're valuable. There are three things I want to address with you today. First of all, let's talk about establishing a good remote working culture with some team plays that you can use with your team and also cross-functionally. The first play, I call it the user manual. This is basically, imagine if you came with a user manual. People, before working with you, they can just browse your manual and they can see how to best work with someone like you. So this is a great exercise to do with your entire team and also to do with people that you work across functions in a day-to-day basis. Especially today during the pandemic, you can look at things such as what are some of the times that you may have family situations or you have to take pets for a walk or take care of them that might be impacting your traditional normal working hours. Also, because of the adjustment for working from home, are there any adjustments that you're going to have to make or other team members have to make because of working remotely? Especially if you have team members that have decided to move across the country to stay closer to family or friends, and then it changes completely their schedules. Look at also some potential disruptions due to work at home situations. I can give you a perfect example. My neighbor, every Tuesday at 10 a.m., he turns on a lawnmower. So I know that I need to avoid any very important meeting at Tuesdays at 10 a.m. because there's noise is coming from right outside my window. There might be other situations in which you might have kids around you trying to do homework, and they may come to you and ask for help, or you have some certain family members that also need help from you. But the goal here is to look through how to best work with you in today's situation. How do you best work? How should you best receive feedback? Or there are particular times that you just have to break because of making dinner or making lunch for family members. So those are all important conversations to have. This will also open up new ways of communication and new opportunities to collaborate with other team members by better understanding what their current situation is. Another often overlooked aspect of running effective teams and even running effective meetings in any situation, but especially now, is looking at virtual meeting ground rules. So this is basically looking at how can we best run those meetings and what are the external factors at play. And it's interesting to discuss with your team members, like what are the best and worst times for a meeting? Should we all have our cameras on and off? Who is going to be keeping notes, and where should we keep those notes, and how do we share those notes, and how do we make sure that we can collaborate? Should we be rotating? Maybe meeting hosts, if you have, let's say, stand-up meetings with your teams, maybe rotate who's running those meetings. But also the other interesting thing is, how about doing some meeting icebreakers, or before going chit chat in the beginning of the meeting to go right down to business? Or does the team want to have more chit chat just because we're not seeing each other in the office and we don't have the time now to just, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, did you catch that latest Netflix movie? And you may want to incorporate those things so people feel more connected. Again, this is part of talking to your team, noting down what works for your team and what doesn't. Now, let's talk about a final and third play here that I think is very interesting. And I participated out of the broader team that I thought was eye-opening. This is what we call a work-life impact play. And what does that mean is, as your team has tried to adapt to remote work and other teams across the organization, you can now invite team members to participate in this to really understand what is happening in terms of your home office life, your role requirements, and also what is the support network that you and your team have around yourselves. Let's dive into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. So you have those quadrants for each of those different aspects. So if we focus on the first one, for example, your home office life, the angles that we have here, the axes are talking about whether you have significant household responsibilities or fewer household responsibilities. If you have kids and you have to cook for them, or you have to help them with homework, there might be significant household responsibilities versus you live alone and maybe you just have a dog, fewer household responsibilities. How is your space? Is it a personal space? You have your own office, a place you can just lock yourself in and forget about the outside world? Or is it a shared space? Maybe you're sharing the same space with a spouse or with kids or other family members. Depending on where you place yourself within those quadrants, it gives others a better understanding of your home office life and what to expect. The next one is related to role requirements. And the same thing happens here. Looking at whether you're someone that's working on complex workflows or independent workflows. And also on the other axis, do you need to have several social interactions for your work to get done, or fewer social interactions for your work to get done? Again, placing a small dot here within each the quadrant that represents what your situation is can also help other team members better understand. And finally, the support network. This is something interesting because it also talks about what you need to do to be successful. Is your work related to strong relationships or weaker relationships? Do you have a stronger workplace network? Maybe you're a recent hire at a company, you have a weaker workplace network. This, especially if you are a people manager, helps you get a better understanding of the type of support that a certain employee might need. As you run these play and with your team, is also interesting if you start bringing people from other sides of the organization. So if you collaborate with product managers, if you collaborate with sales enablement, other marketing professionals, and everyone has a better understanding of each person's life situation. Now, all of this is interesting, but what exactly do you do with that information? And here's the next step that is very important, which is let's transform all of those insights and those discussions into specific action items that you and your team can take. And you can divide them, as I'm showing here on the screen on an example, on certain columns here. So what is something that I can do or change because of my situation? Or is there something that we as a team can do to better support each other? Is there something that we can try as a team? And support that we may need from our company also to get going and to do things better. So as an example, you see here, maybe I'm getting video fatigue when I have more than 3 hours per video per day. So I'm going to ensure that some of my meetings are going to become walking meetings. Maybe one-on-ones with my manager. I can ask, hey, can I just dial in with my phone? I don't need to share anything. We can just walk around. If you're managing teams, you can also ask your direct reports to do the same thing. And everyone is going to thank you for not having to jump on another Zoom meeting. Another aspect here is what can we do to better support each other? Maybe it's something about, oh, let's respect our lunch hours so we all can have time and we can have lunch. Or maybe that's not a problem for the team. Let's do something else. Or maybe we need to schedule some time for us to have the ability to really think without any meetings and block like focus time for each of us. And we are going to respect each other's focus time and not override those times with meetings. And maybe something interesting is on the last column here on supporting that we may need from our own company. Maybe we need to ask for laptop stands. We need to ask the company, can we have a bigger monitor? Or can we have something else, stand-up desk? What else can we do as a team, or what should we ask the company to help us? And this is a great exercise to get everyone involved in how can we become more effective, which in turn is going to increase the team's productivity. These plays and a few more plays you can find online at atlassian.com/team playbook. You can read through examples, you can download templates and guidance on how you can run these plays with your own teams. This is the first aspect of creating the culture of collaboration. Now let's dive into something else. You create the team culture and you start understanding how to better work for more productivity. Now, how about engaging in some virtual team building exercises? And this is super interesting because now we can look at more of the fun, right? Like there's great work, but how about the play aspect? So teams can continue collaborating, getting to know each other better, especially if you're inviting more people that you collaborate with that traditionally wouldn't come to, let's say, an offsite that you're doing with your team. And you can sign up for a number of different vendor coordinated classes and events such as virtual wine tastings. You can even have a virtual art class, and that means there's someone shipping art supplies to people in your team and then showing up as a structure to guide everyone through, let's say, a watercoloring session, and then everyone at the end shows up to the camera their best effort, or even a magic show or a comedy show to get everyone laughing around the theme. Or you might even have some people around the company and your team itself, they're super creative. Maybe someone wants to host even like a trivia game using Kahoot or another online trivia app. Maybe someone's really good at origami, or they're passionate about yoga or a workout session. And I've been in places where we have a team member like at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. She's like, okay, every Thursday I'm gonna run my yoga session. Who wants to join me? Here's the Zoom link, and everyone who wants joins that. Or cool things that you can do with your team. And that creates opportunities for interaction and collaboration that you wouldn't have otherwise now in this lockdown aspect that we're living in our lives. And now finally, let's celebrate failures. And this is part of looking at a concept called psychological safety across your team, which is, let's talk about it's okay to have failures. It's okay to do things wrong. It's okay for sometimes, you're not, it's not a good day for you. You've had too many Zoom meetings, and the next Zoom meeting, something happens. And, this is a few of the things that you probably have seen around, right? People floating around some Zoom bingo cards, and we have all been there when you're trying to talk and your phone is on mute and you didn't realize that, or you're pulling up a slide and it's the wrong deck and you have to shift through things because you were hurried into the meeting. It's okay. And the important thing here is if you are a people manager, have people looking up to you, at how do you take care of those things, it's good to laugh at yourself. One of the things I was doing at a previous company is we were starting our weekly team meetings with one weird thing that happened at the Zoom call last week, and it could be anything. And we had a lot of interesting and funny examples, from babies jumping into someone else's laps to someone spilling coffee on their laptop. It doesn't matter. It's just like you take things easier and you tell people it's okay. It will happen to me. It will happen to you. Let's move on. Let's have a good laugh. And by this, you create that safety of, okay, it's fine to fail. It's also good if you bring this culture of it's okay to fail into the other areas of the business that you're running, into serious meetings, and things happen, and you take people aside and say, it's okay. That's not a problem. I think this is all we have time for at the moment. So I want to thank you so much. And remember to go to atlassian.com/team-playbook and look at more worked in place. If you want, feel free to connect with me. If you have additional questions, reach out to me. I'll be happy to share with you additional examples and best practices that I have seen that work to create remote work efficiency. Thank you so much.
Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're back for more specialist insights, welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. Before we begin, we want to say a thank you to our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this awesome event to life. We're sure you'll enjoy it. And if you're on the lookout for more resources, our Slack community is home to a bunch of contributions from thousands and thousands of fellow product marketers. So if you're not already a member, join the debate, but for now, enjoy the presentation.
Let's work on videos, analysis, stats.
In some ways,
charts,
things are kind of the same.
as fast as we can.
People are dropping off.
In other ways,
The screen's too slow.
well,
Fluffy, seriously.
We still got a couple things just to polish this up.
the good news is we've learned we can do this.
Any questions?
Hello?
Okay, let's run through the sign-up flow. I really like how clean it is.
Turns out when we're hitting our goals, nobody cares if we're wearing pants. We just need the right tools. So our team stays a team. So no matter what comes next, we know we can work better, do better. This is going to work.
Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to Product Marketing Off-Piste. I'm delighted to be joined by David Gilmore, Director of Product Marketing at PayByPhone. David's a digital and product marketing strategist with proven success in building product marketing programs from the ground up, and we'll be discussing his experiences in building the product marketing function within product. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, David.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Oh, thanks for joining us. And so just to start, could you just give us a very quick insight into your current role at PayByPhone?
Yeah, sure. So I head up the global product marketing function within PayByPhone. So we operate across North America and Europe, as well as the UK, with a small operation out of Australia as well. So my team are based out of Vancouver in Canada, with colleagues across Germany, the UK, and France.
Okay, brilliant. And obviously, you specialize in building product marketing teams, and every product marketing team has to start from the ground up, and identifying an appropriate flavor of product marketing for each respective company plays such a prevalent role in the process. But having built product marketing teams yourself, how do you think PMMs, or how can PMMs ensure that they're taking the necessary steps in identifying a fit that's appropriate for them?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, and there's no sort of perfect answer to it, to be honest. I think like the starting point is really to spend a lot of time, if you're new to a company, spend a lot of time talking to stakeholders. There's the executives, of course, but really talking to people across the organization, everybody who's involved in anything really to do with the product life cycle is worth talking to. And sort of building from that, I would recommend kind of starting to build out a gap analysis. Doesn't need to necessarily be a formal gap analysis, but really identifying the strengths and the weaknesses of the company when it comes to product marketing. And then sort of comparing that really with, if you're starting and you're on your own, then your own strengths. Where can you really deliver the most value for the organization? If you have a team, or if you're planning on building a team and you kind of have an idea of the skill set in mind, then obviously trying to match that as well to the organization and kind of where you can deliver the most value. And then I think sort of really on the fit side, it's like where can you have the most impact, be most successful, and there may be something that's being done already. For example, go to market really may be sort of in motion for the company. Could it be better? That's something that you need to look at, and there's an opportunity there. If it's if there's something that's working well, conversely, for example, if the product managers have got pricing and there's not a lot of opportunity for improving it, then maybe that's not a good place to start. and you know, like over time that obviously changes as well. So it's important to be nimble, particularly when you don't know, when it's a fresh company or fresh landscape. Yeah, and I think, you know, if you're already within a company, then you have a head start, and you can sort of answer a lot of those questions, and then it's just about focus and starting to knock off some of the key wins for the company.
Yeah, sure. And of course, you know, building a product marketing team, it isn't a process that happens overnight. It takes time. It's a gradual process. And it often begins with integrating one product marketer into a company setup. However, after this stage has been completed, what do you consider to be the best practice for expanding product marketing into its own department within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good follow-on from the first question. I think, you know, as you start to build or start to sort of embed yourself in an organization, or embed product marketing in an organization, you need to really work hard on communicating wins, keeping stakeholders in the loop on what you're working on, what the progress is, especially in the early days as you're building trust. It's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to all of us. It's not something I necessarily enjoy all the time. It feels like a lot of hard work to keep people in the loop, but it is really important as you're building product marketing. I think sort of on the side of that, it's really important to build processes and set rules of engagement quite early on, so that you're setting yourself up for success later. And then also probably sort of just not being afraid to say no in the early stages if you're being asked to do too much, or you're being asked to do things that just don't really necessarily make sense for you to do. You know, I speak to a lot of product marketers who say that they join an organization and they're asked to dive into putting together collateral graphic design work because there's no support for graphic design. You know, is that really the best use of your skills? You know, and it's important to be I think strong there, and set yourself up so that you don't end up being the person who does the PowerPoint presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite funny you should go down that route, really, because it kind of leads on to my next question. Because in some instances, it can be assumed by, you know, some companies, certainly not all of them, but some, that product marketers are or should be solely responsible for building the product marketing team. But what role can non-PMM teams play in the formation of the introduction of a product marketing team? Because surely it doesn't all fall onto the shoulders of a product marketer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, I mean, I think, you know, any new function that you're building in a company, you need to build advocates, and you really need to work with those advocates to sort of help you move things forward. Product managers, you know, in my experience of working directly within the product, or product managers are often, they're overworked. They want to be successful with their products. They see opportunities but can't necessarily deliver on those opportunities. And so, you know, with all of those things, they can be really good advocates for product marketing. They can stand up and really help to say, look, we need more product marketing support. We need to grow this team. And that can really help. I think, you know, executives are the obvious one as well. And you know, to my last point, really keeping those stakeholders in the loop, and especially executive groups in the loop and on what you're doing and what you're delivering, can make a big difference over time.
Okay. And in terms of the processes and tools that are used when you're building out a product marketing team, which would you consider to be like indispensable to prompt the maximum engagement between members of the product marketing team as well as your customers?
Yeah, I think processes wise, there's lots of different, you know, kind of processes you build, and it depends a little bit on fit as to what you do there. I think having a very clear, documented go-to-market process for the organization is a huge one. If product pricing is something that you're involved in, then sort of very clearly outlining what the process is for approving pricing, for reviewing pricing, I think, you know, helps a lot as well. In terms of tools, I'm a big fan of product engagement tools like WalkMe and Intercom. I think, you know, on the other end of it, for understanding how strategies play out, analytics tools like Amplitude. I'm a massive fan of Amplitude. And Google Analytics obviously is a bit of a staple, are really great. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say that Slack sometimes can be a bit of a distraction, and I think it can maybe sort of undermine your cause a little bit if you rely too much on Slack and don't spend enough time talking and having kind of quality communication with people.
Slack making you slack, shall we say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the relationship between product marketing and company stakeholders, if we could just focus on that for a second. So it isn't always plain sailing necessarily. In securing buy-in, it can sometimes be a challenge. But when you're building a product marketing team, how do you position product marketing as being such an important function when it comes to securing the faith and support of key stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and there's not an easy answer to this one. I think, you know, it goes back a little bit to your first question around identifying fit. You really do need to focus on those areas where you can deliver the most value, get the wins in there, and be communicative around those wins and around the challenges that you're experiencing as well. It's not always possible, but if you can get any sort of quantitative results on what you're doing, it helps massively to be able to present data to show the benefit of your activities. And I think, you know, on the other side of it, but also related to data, building up those sort of insights, so spending the time and effort on market research, on talking to your customer groups, on understanding your products, talking to your dev teams, talking to your product teams, and really building up the insights and bringing those things together. So your customers on one side and your products on the other. You know, it can really help to build trust. And in my experience, you know, a lot of companies have experts in either end, so experts in customers, or at least people who talk to customers a lot, and then experts in products, and there's not necessarily that coming together, and that's, I think, where product marketing can really help as well.
Okay, and you mentioned the challenges, you know, the challenging elements of it, you know, encountering challenges, but first and foremost, can you give us an insight specifically into how your product team operates? But if you could then almost just give us an insight as well into some of the challenges that you've perhaps encountered when building your respective team, and now that it's in place, what benefits would you consider that you bring to the table that you can maybe turn around to this, you know, key stakeholders and say, look, we bring X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
that a little bit clearer for them.
Yeah, so lots of challenges. It's sort of an interesting one. So in terms of the way we're set up, so I report into our Chief Product Officer. We have a team of product marketers who work with the product managers side by side. We're on a ratio of about 5-to-1 product managers to product marketers, so stretched a bit thin, to be honest there. Our portfolio of products at Pay by Phone is quite diverse, which is sort of creates some interesting challenges on its own. We have sort of 4 main customer groups, and those customer groups have quite different needs. And we're working on really trying to establish product market fit as a product organization, and you know, with product marketing playing an important role in that. I think, you know, onto the challenges, some of the challenges that I've specifically experienced have been around sort of maturity a little bit as we try and move from an organization which has been doing things one way for a long time, didn't have product marketing, and trying to shift the mindset and help people get there, be a bit more rigorous in terms of how we're approaching things like go to market, you know, putting the thought behind positioning, and introducing new product names, that's been an interesting one. As I don't know if you've experienced, but if you try and introduce a new product name and somebody's been using a name for a very long time, it's always hard to get that traction. And so you have to keep banging that drum. I think one of the big advantages to being, within product is that you can be involved with the product managers right from the discovery phase. So you don't have that sometimes awkward handoff of a product getting to a point of development and you're not necessarily having all the information or having had the opportunity to do the research early on. So, we end up with a lot of really good shared knowledge, a lot of thought around, the name and the position and the messaging really early on in the product. We start with building out either a dummy press release or a landing page with the product managers. And that helps to sort of, perhaps alleviate some of those challenges that you can get later on when communication isn't necessarily there, or you sort of find that there's gaps in your knowledge as you're trying to kind of push things forward.
Okay, yeah, sure. And obviously, as part of the process, when you're putting together a team, and just throughout, any product marketer will understand the importance of having a watertight pricing strategy. But from your perspective, what's your favorite or favored pricing strategy, and how long did it take you to identify this as being a strategy that's compatible within your team?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I have to say we're sort of still working through it, to be honest. But so we're trying to apply value-based approach to pricing. There's a lot of work that's involved in that, and particularly where there's not a ton of really good insights into really what our customers value in the first place. So you have to do a lot of groundwork, have to spend a lot of time talking to customers, working out how to quantify that in context can be quite difficult, particularly I find the sort of the B2B and our government type products where, maybe value is not necessarily something that the person you're talking to, or the buyer, is necessarily kind of as attuned to. So it's sort of lots of work there, but I think it's a good approach for SaaS type products. And then, in the past, I've used cost plus and, a mix of cost plus and competitor pricing. And it's been a lot easier to do, to be honest. Particularly if you've got a market where you've got sort of pricing is publicly available and you can look at how you compare, and you've got lots of customers and you can easily test their willingness to pay. So yeah, it's a conversation I could spend a long time on, to be honest, but it's an interesting one. And I'd be happy to come back in a year's time and talk about what we've learned then.
I'll keep you word to that then, in that case, David. Building a product marketing team, it can, it's unpredictable. It can be turbulent at times, but nonetheless, it is really exciting. What would you consider to be the most important lessons that you've learned whilst building your teams at different stages?
Yeah. I think one of them is sort of you do have to spend time kind of winning friends and influencing people, but also not being afraid to challenge preconceptions. And I think unfortunately sometimes marketing is tainted with the wrong brush, and particularly sort of as product marketers, you come in and the people are saying, "Oh, so you're the social media person, are you?" No, definitely not that. And so you do have to be prepared to sort of to challenge people, I think, and to get people to think differently. I think something that I've really learned is being realistic with expectations, and I tend to be quite ambitious with plans, and when you're new to a company and you're starting an entirely new department, things take time, to be honest. It takes time to get the resource. It takes time to get kind of settled in, but it also takes time to get the information that you need to really kind of get things going and to work effectively. I think, you know, it's important to stay really focused and not to go too broad too quickly, particularly if you've got a big product portfolio and a lot of product managers that you're working with. And then I think lastly, just being prepared to take the wrong path sometimes. Just make a decision, go with it. If it doesn't work, be prepared to sort of admit that, learn from your mistakes and be nimble and move on. I don't think, you know, or if there is a guide, a Bible to how to do this, then I've not found it. I think it's different for every organization and the people that you're working with. So you have to try things, and you're not always going to get those things right. So it's important to be open to that and be prepared to work within that.
Yeah, sure. And just on the topic really of mistakes and, you know, learning from your mistakes, with the power of retrospect, have you ever made any decisions, you know, previously when you perhaps didn't have as much experience and whilst building a product marketing team that you regret looking back? Or is it a case of, look, if I wouldn't have made these mistakes, I wouldn't be almost like where I am now, really, maybe because it's been part of your development?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always easy with hindsight to be critical of your decisions, and to look back and say, oh, you know, if only I did it that way. But I think in reality, you kind of make decisions in the moment with the knowledge that you have at the time. And so I mean, regretting decisions is perhaps, I'm not sure how useful it is to regret things necessarily. I think, you know, if I was to do things differently and I had the opportunity to, I'd spend more time kind of managing expectations and carving out the time to do things like market research and get a really good understanding of the market and the customers and building the foundations for product marketing before getting to the point where you're actually sort of delivering or working on go-to-market or, you know, or any of the other pieces that we work on. You know, that said, like, it's very easy to say that with hindsight. The reality is it's a fine balance between showing results to win trust and to, you know, you've got to sort of show results if you want to build a team, really, and you've got to have trust to, you know, if they're, you know, you're going to get additional team members or, you know, or tools or resource. So you know, it's always that fine balance, you know, building trust and setting yourself up for future success, and you have to kind of work with what you've got and work on that and evolve that over time. And yeah, as I said before, learn from the mistakes and kind of keep working towards a better future.
Yeah, sure. And what would be like I mean, just from speaking to you, I can see how passionate you are about this, but for anybody who, you know, is following in your footsteps and doing the, you know, just starting out and, you know, building a team for themselves, what would be your top piece of advice for a product marketer who's in that, you know, the early stages of doing so?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's lots of pieces of advice I could give, to be honest, but I think the one that I would see as almost the most important is be kind to yourself. Celebrate the wins along the way, accept that it's not always going to be easy. You know, you do have to be a bit resilient, building out a new team, finding a new fit. You're inevitably going to step on people's toes. You know, in some cases, people will be celebrating you entering their room. In other places, people will be like, wow, no, I did that and it was perfectly fine before. You know, and so, you know, you just have to, I think it's really important to look after yourself and to believe in yourself and to be kind to yourself. Don't knock yourself back if you feel like, oh, I could have done this differently, or, you know, oh, I wish I'd done that. You know, I think, you know, it's really important to learn, to sort of to build those relationships, to work with the people that you know who are going to be your key advocates and stakeholders, to sort of build the support network that you're going to need as well, because you can't do it alone.
Okay, and last but by no means least, it's been it has been such a challenging year for product marketers, everybody. It has been such a turbulent 12 months, and with 2021 around the corner, I just wanted to ask you to for rounding off what has been a really interesting chat, what your prediction for 2021 is for the product marketing world.
Yeah, well, big one. I think it's an exciting time for product marketing, to be honest. I mean, like the great work that Product Marketing Alliance are doing and kind of raising awareness and building that sort of knowledge base of what product marketing is. 2021, what it's going to be like for anybody, I don't know, but I think we have a lot of opportunity to show the sort of the professional value of product marketing, particularly in the tech space. Build out, I would hope more companies will bring in product marketing at an earlier stage. It's a lot harder to move into a company that's been around for 15 years and hasn't had product marketing than it is one that's been around for a year or two, and you're kind of building with the organization. So my non-prediction is that that product marketing will be brought in earlier and valued from the offset in organizations.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Product Marketing Off-Piste. David, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure talking with you too.
Thank you very much. Cheers, and all the best with the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.